Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 13th, 2017 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you would stand with us, please. Commissioner Stan Vaught will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Stan.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come together to conduct the county's business. We ask that you be with us and give us wisdom to conduct it in a way that you would see fit. We ask that you be with our local leaders, our state leaders, and our national leaders as they go through the following year. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Call the roll, please, Gail.
Rhonda Allen. Here. Jim Averwater. Here. Lee Bogle. Here. David Jones. Here. Will Jordan. Here. Mike Cush. Craig Lynch. Here. Chip Pinion. Here. Charlotte P. Mike Vaught. Here. And Jeff Phillips.
Present.
Have a quorum.
Thank you, Gail. This time we need to approve minutes for the 10-10-16 meeting, the 10-24-16 meeting, and the 2-13-17 meeting. Call on Craig Lynch.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I do so make the motion that we approve those minutes.
Motion and a second to approve those 3 meeting minutes. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? The motion carries. Thank you. We have no items withdrawn or deferred, and under new business, item 6A submitted for site plan approval. Item 17-3007, Crescent Church of Christ, new construction of 5,284 square feet of community assembly space on 4 acres zoned RM, located at 4915 Barfield Crescent Road. Crescent Church of Christ is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, Commission members. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. You'll recall at our last Planning Commission meeting, I believe it's February the 27th, we deferred this item from the agenda. There were a number of outstanding comments. We've met with the applicant since that time and their design engineer and gone over the outstanding items. From our standpoint, pretty much all those items have been corrected. Mike does have a couple of items that he wanted to just give an update about the drainage of the property, but from a planning standpoint, it looks to be in good order.
Okay, they've addressed most of our concerns, and they're going to get some more additional topo in the ditch along the right-of-way of Barfield Crescent Road, and they've adjusted a few things around the building, so we're comfortable the way it stands right now, and we think we can get everything approved.
Staff recommends approval.
At this point, yes, sir.
Everything, you satisfied with all the discussion y'all had with the?
Yes, sir. The comments that are still outstanding, we know will be addressed, just a matter of getting the work done, but all the other concerns we had have been taken care of.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 17-3007, the Crescent Church of Christ. Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? The motion to approve carries. We need a motion to suspend the rules to go over a final plat. We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. And motion carries. This would be item 6B, final plat. Item number is 16-2052, Creek Bend Subdivision, Section 1, Phase 5, 26 lots on 14-plus acres. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This particular plat was actually approved by the Planning Commission back in August. Final plat approvals at the Planning Commission are good for 6 months. He was ready to record it. Everything's been signed. From our standpoint, everything's in good order with it. We're ready to sign it, but it's just a little outside of the 6-month window. So they're just asking for reapproval of this. Staff is completely fine with this. We're ready to sign it now. Just with the expiration, we wanted to bring it back through first.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion and a second to approve item 16-2052. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B, zoning requests that are scheduled for public hearings. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them tonight, and it looks like there are a number of Rutherford County citizens that are here to voice an opinion, and we welcome those opinions. We will go over with you that our guidelines, so we will be able to get through tonight's agenda tonight, that you keep your comments to about 3 minutes, unless you're addressing on behalf of a group. If you will identify yourself as a representative of a group, I will give you, or we will give you, as much time as you may need. But if you could, keep your comments to about 3 minutes. Item 6B1, thoroughbred construction. Item number 16-A019. Location is Epps Mill Road, County District 6, which is County Commissioner Joe Frank Jernigan's district. Size of the site is approximately 41 acres, tax map 157. The existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. The proposed zoning is a PUD, planned unit development, residential subdivision. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this property is located off of Epps Mill Road. This application and this property will look familiar to the Planning Commission. This was presented originally back at your November 14th, 2016 meeting. When the applicant had first met with staff regarding this project, we advised that the plan development would have been the best approach for this. After discussing his application, and he had some concerns regarding the time frame for preparation of a PUD, he ultimately decided to go with the multifamily zone, the RMF. Several concerns were brought up at that Planning Commission meeting back in November, one of which was the ability to construct apartments or other multifamily type projects on the property once it was zoned. We explained to the Planning Commission and to those in attendance at that time that despite the applicant having no intention of constructing multifamily units, if the application were approved and the multifamily zoning were to be instituted, that there would be no way we could stop him if he decided to change his mind and build apartments or sell the property and build apartments after that. After discussion and the public hearing, the Planning Commission did ultimately recommend denial of the multifamily zoning request. The applicant after that abandoned the multifamily request and has moved forward with the application that you have before you tonight. Consistent with our PUD regulations in Chapter 9 of our ordinance, the applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting on January 26th of this year at Whitworth Buchanan Middle School. It was well attended by the residents of the area. Similar concerns were brought up during that meeting, that some of the same ones that we heard during the Planning Commission, being access to the property, traffic to and from the development, safety of the existing residences in regards to the increased traffic and property values. And we also, staff was there, and we also answered questions about the rezoning process. Your iPads include a copy of the pattern book, which explains the development in greater detail. There's not a whole lot of difference between what he's asking for and the original concept plan tonight, and the proposed plan shown in the pattern book. Of course, one significant difference is the addition of the open space, which all PUDs are required to have. The pattern book is calling for a single-family development of 166 lots, which is about 4 lots to the acre. Homes will be a minimum of 1,200 square feet in size, with 1 or 2 car garages, paved driveways, and decorative mailboxes. Homes will have a 10% masonry requirement on their frontages, with all other remaining areas being vinyl sided. The pattern book identifies 4 phases, which you can see in the book, with plans to build approximately 40 homes per year. Of course, a lot of that will depend on market demand. Again, the pattern book is on your iPads if you have additional information. One of the biggest issues that was discussed, really, even had a conversation today regarding it with one of the residents in the area regarding access to the property. This property will not have direct access to Epps Mill Road. It will have to utilize the existing streets in the Epps Mill Road subdivision, the Buchanan Estates subdivision in Epps Mill Road, through Dunbar Lane. The applicant's concept plan does show a number of stub outs to the other sides of the property. However, as Buchanan Estates we'll have to continue to develop in order to utilize those particular stubs. Traffic study has been submitted to staff. I'll let Mike get into any of the particulars he'd like to, but in general found that the traffic volumes, even after this development would be put in, would still be within a level of service A or B for the different intersections evaluated, which means it still be operating in the green, so to speak. No buffering is required for this, and it's another single-family development, but they are proposing to keep a buffer along the northern property line, and performance standards are not a part of this, again, being that they are single-family uses in origin. Staff originally recommended, again, that they go with the plan development approach, so we are glad that they did do this. This area, as you recall, is served by sanitary sewer from the city of Murfreesboro, so any plats or plans, if this is approved, will also have to come before the city of Murfreesboro Planning Commission as well as the Rutherford County Commission. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is present, and they also have a PowerPoint presentation they'd like to go through on this.
Questions from staff?
Most of the planned units that we go through, the percentage of masonry is a little bit higher than 10%. Why is this one so low?
Well, and the applicant could probably do a better job explaining this than I can, but from my understanding, he's looking really more in the starter home market is really what he's shooting for. So, which is probably explains why it's a little bit less of a brick masonry requirement than others that we have seen.
Any questions for staff? I guess before we get into the public hearing, would like to hear from the applicant and view his presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Phillips. Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree. I'm with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here on behalf of Steve Knox with Thoroughbred Construction and his representative as well, Teresa Kidd. So if you have any specific questions related to building construction or real estate, we have some experts in the crowd as well. Currently, the name of the property is going to be called Beard Estates. The Beards are the families that originally owned the property. They're the owners currently. Mr. Knox is in a contingent relationship with them. If the zoning passes, the sale will go through related to this particular project. As Doug mentioned, this first exhibit just basically talks about the surrounding zoning. It is an RM zoning, and as Doug mentioned, the first proposition was to go with MRF type of zoning. The neighbors expressed extensive concern about the possibility of apartments being built on this piece of property. So as a result, and that was never Mr. Beard's intention, Mr. Knox's intention to put apartments on this property, but the master plan we'll look into shows that he's going to go with single-family residences. We just want to show that right now, that the only thing out there is the Buchanan Estates, and this will be abutted next to the Buchanan Estates. And as Mr. Damasi mentioned, our access point will be Dunbar Lane. Next slide, Doug. Primarily right now the property is vegetated with cedar and hardwood trees, pretty densely vegetated, very slight slope, relatively flat. Drainage kind of shifts to one corner of the piece of property, but and for the most part the property will be cleared as a result of this development. But as Mr. Damasi mentioned, Mr. Knox is more than willing to do our best to preserve a natural, it's really not a buffer, but it's an existing tree line that's on the bordering property with Buchanan Estates. One of the characteristics of Buchanan Estates that we wanted to bring to your attention is that the roads are very wide there, kind of unusually wide, but it's nice. The nice thing is it provides a lot of room for what would be considered more of a safe thoroughfare for this particular subdivision. The issue the neighbors are having currently, though, because the roads are wider, people tend to race down those roads. So that's something that maybe need to be addressed in the future. However, the traffic study, as Mr. Machi mentioned, says that the level of service that will be provided will be adequate, that the roads will support the amount of development we'd like to do in this particular location, as well as Epps Mill Road will support the level of development we'd like to complete on this location as well. This is the master plan, and as Mr. Damasi mentioned, there's multiple stub outs that are going to be leading from this particular piece of property, but we have no control over the surrounding property that is owned by other entities. But we are planning on connectivity, which is a very high priority for both the county and the city of Murfreesboro. Dunbar Lane is the main access into the site, and eventually the first phase, as soon as we can, there'll be an access point coming out of the subdivision back onto the main road into Buchanan Estates. There will be nearly 4 acres, a little over 4 acres committed to green space. That green space will have amenities associated with that will be used by this current development. And there'll be 166 lots, basically a 4-unit per acre density, and about 4.42 acres used for green space. The neighbors have asked if there's going to be any access to Epps Mill Road, and right now the pattern book shows that there's no connection, that we don't own those pieces of property, but there's 2 properties that separate this particular piece of property from Epps Mill Road. We wish we had ownership there, but that's not an opportunity that we have right now. The question about the quality of the homes, Mr. Knox has done a great job in terms of creating a really nice curbside look. The homes are about 10%, as was brought forward by Mr. Phillips, of masonry, that'd be stone or brick. The rest is a siding product, but Mr. Knox has done a really good job in terms of creating more of a vertical look, using board and batten type of siding mixed in with lap siding. So very, very good looking homes, nice color combinations. And he's currently working on a development called Richmond's Retreat. And we asked the neighbors that came to the neighborhood meeting if they wanted to. He has a model home there. Several of the neighbors took advantage of going to the model home, kind of looking at the quality inside finishes, as well as looking at the overall presentation of the homes. So very, very happy with the overall aesthetic, very nice color combinations, and a high quality home. But I think the biggest concern with the neighbors was how are these homes going to impact their property value. So that was addressed, and Mrs. Kidd did some research on homes that were selling inside Richmond's Retreat and homes that are selling within Buchanan Estates. And what we found was that the homes that Mr. Knox are building currently are selling for about $6 to $10 more a square foot than those in Buchanan Estates. And the size of home that Mr. Knox is proposing is consistent with multiple homes inside Buchanan Estates. So this is not an anomaly to what's going on out there. The density would be a little bit harder, larger, a little bit more dense, obviously. Those homes in Buchanan Estates are on large lots. This would be more density, but we're finding that to be a trend throughout the county, throughout the city, as far as just development costs and how to get that done. So Mr. Knox is consistent with what we see coming in terms of the county development. As Mr. DeMonte mentions, the homes will be about 1,200 square feet at a minimum. The price point at this point is anywhere from $180,000 and up. The next slide is really the comparison chart that Mrs. Kidd put together related to home values and square footage cost. And she compared 3 homes that were comparable size in Richmond's Retreat with 3 homes that recently sold in Buchanan Estates, and these are recent sales. And really the homes in Richmond's Retreat sold between $131 a square foot and $135 a square foot. Those in Buchanan Estates sold from $123 a square foot to $130 a square foot. So as I mentioned, there's about a $6 to $10 square foot difference between the product that Mr. Knox is putting out with this development and what's currently existing at Buchanan Estates. As mentioned, also there will be amenities associated with the subdivision, so that helps with home value and retention within the community. The last slide basically shows the green spaces, the amenity center, playground, some kind of a pavilion. But I just want to bring to note, the neighbors were very concerned about trying to respect that existing tree line. And that's just shown by basically a green line along the top of the development, right along the Buchanan Estates line. And as we mentioned, that's a desire to keep that tree line intact, as well as the understory associated with it. The only concern is all the natural drainage goes towards that green space that's towards that top side. And so Mr. Knox is prepared to have to put some swales along the backside of those properties adjacent to Buchanan Estates. But we're also making those lots steeper to compensate for that swale, so in order to preserve that natural tree line. So with that in mind, I'm available for any questions you may have. And Mr. Phillips, upon the conclusion of the public hearing, I'd appreciate the opportunity to respond to anything that was addressed. So if there's any questions, glad to answer them.
What about the connection you showed going to my left? I don't know what's north. That it was a dotted line. What's the time frame on that connection? At this time, are we only going to have the one?
We will.
And what's the time frame on that next connection?
Well, that has a lot to do with, there's a kind of a drainage easement that works in there, and there's some work that has to be done in terms of potentially some sort of way to cross that low water area. Mr. Knox has a real good relationship with that adjacent neighbor, as well as Mr. Beard. So that's just been put on the radar screen as a potential connection. The traffic study shows exit points, going out. Not everyone in Buchanan Estates goes out to Epps Mill. A lot of them go in the other direction towards 99. So that's in the future, but it's not exactly established when.
I just have a bit of a problem with 102 lots in one street. One wreck right there, and those people are trapped. That's just what I'm looking at here at first blush. Is we usually ask for multiple access points, and whether that's making a deal with a neighbor to cross some property or whatever. But I see that as being a huge red flag to me. Because one wreck right there, and those people are not going anywhere. But I know about planning.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Knox, could you give a little insight on where we are with that potential connecting point? Because I know we've discussed it, and I know that it's been addressed by the neighbors. Do you have anything we can share on that?
While he's coming up here, I just want to make one other comment, just real quick, Clyde. We were looking at the pattern book. You're still showing the side setbacks of 5 feet. That needs to be at least 7.5. I mean, that's an easy fix, but just FYI, just make that change. That way they've got the 15-foot separation between structures.
My name's Steve Knox with Thoroughbred Construction. On that issue you just mentioned and stuff, can I do 5 and 15?
No, we want to see 7.5 and 7.5, because at that point, if somebody has the 5 foot, then it's incumbent that somebody has to make sure that the next one is 10, and if that doesn't get out into the field, then you may have structures that are 5 foot setback on this side, 5 foot over here, and there's only 10-foot separation. So we want to see the 7.5 on each side to avoid that.
And for drainage, we'd need 10 and 10, or a 20-foot total at least, a minimum drainage easement between lots. So it might get a little tricky in between some of them.
All right. That access, I don't own any of the property around this development, and we've talked with the people, and at this point, they're not allowing me to do anything. That dotted line that you see there, that's the sewer connection easement that we're getting to connect the sewer to the property. But right now, I do not have where adjoining property owners will allow me to cut a road through or connect.
I'm just wanting to point out this is a PUD. It's not a straight site plan for an RS or RM15 subdivision, and we're giving more density and all. We usually get something in return, and to me, that's a deficiency. That's a huge deficiency, just for me. I'm not speaking for anybody else. That needs to be worked out before I'm ready to vote for 6,000-foot lots, and 100 plus of them, with one way in and one way out. I can understand you wanting to build houses cheaper to fit the first-time home buyers and things like that. But I remember when the tornadoes hit years ago out at Southridge, that whole subdivision was trapped. And we said shortly thereafter we were going to do our best not to approve any more subdivisions that recreated that situation. And without those other connections, so those connections could happen next year, or they could be 30 years, and stuff. Those houses would be trapped. But that's just me thinking out loud.
Yeah, without me controlling that land and stuff, I don't have access to be able to do additional roads at this time.
Well, with that, Mr. Damasio was very adamant about making sure that any connectors we put on our piece of property lined up with the stub streets that are already occurring in Buchanan Estates. So if you look at where those stubs are, they're really directly related to what's already been stubbed out, and Buchanan has multiple stub points. But like Mr. Knox said, they're not in our control as far as those adjacent properties. Any other questions?
Well, would there be a possibility to making two, one on the left, one on the right? Entrances, you'd lose one lot?
Well, I think Mr. Knox would be more than willing to try to have another entry point, but we don't have another stub out to lean to. That's our biggest issue. All those are already finished out pieces of property that are adjacent to the property line. Is that what you're asking for, another exit point?
What Will was referring to, there's one in and out. If you just make two in and out up there on the top side there.
Yeah, we currently don't have another vacant lot with which we can kind of tie in at this point.
Doug, can you go to slide 7? That's the one that I think is going to show us the best. It's the aerial image that has all the 3 boxes.
You don't have that, right? Do you have all the?
Was it one that you'd gone over, or are you
No, she's in the pattern book.
It's in the pattern book.
Actually, I think I've got the pattern book on there. Or maybe I don't. I may not. This works. Okay. Is that what you were looking for, Ms. Allen? Okay.
Yeah, to my point earlier, there's a street just barely off the property line on both sides. I mean, looks to me like it's a good opportunity to partner up with a neighbor and get us another way in and out.
Doug, on one of these aerials, I see some streets drawn in here as proposed. Some of them come off of Buzzard Branch Drive. Well, I suppose all of them connect there ultimately, but they're very close to the property line here. Where do we stand on these proposed streets? Is that something that's already been submitted?
It's part of the master plan, but nothing that's been submitted beyond that. Really, the sections that we're looking at are more to the northwest right now. As far as what their time frame look like for all those proposed streets off of Buzzard Branch, at this point, we're just not sure. It's really up to the developer at this point, and we haven't been given any kind of a time frame from them on that.
So that's a different developer?
Yes, sir. It's a different developer.
Doug, I remember on, I think it's north side of States, North Murfreesboro, whatever it is, the Pitts Farm on Lascassas Highway, you know where I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. One way in, one way out, as I remember, about 160 or 70 lots, and we did a crash gate and a roughly finished road from the backside in case. Would that be a possibility here?
I think that would be a possibility as well.
I'll
Yes, sir.
say
That
off
could be.
Buzzard Branch and make that elbow there into a connecting street to their subdivision.
It's a pretty substantial drainage way through here, so it's a pretty good-sized box culvert underneath cliffside. So that heavy rain, that could get washed out if it's not built substantial.
Probably need to be pipes under it or something in that nature. But
Pretty good size to be equivalent to a box culvert, yes, sir.
that might make it more acceptable if you could work out something like that. Have two ways in, two ways out anyway, if you were trapped. I noticed in this, I know we're not approving a site plan tonight, but I didn't see any area for retention. So because it's in the
Northwest corner, near the stream.
that counted as part of the green area?
Not the usable space.
Yeah, now, they have to have, when in a PUD, you have to have 10% open space, half of which has to be considered usable by the definitions in our zoning ordinance. You can use detention areas if they're designed properly as part of the open space requirements, but generally the usable open space is separate from that.
I think it's important to add that as a result of the master planning process, those 166 homes, as Mr. Knox mentioned, or as stated in the pattern book, they're probably going to be finished out between, potentially 40 a year. So you got a pretty decent build out on that particular size development, and it would be the expectation, as Mr. Jordan mentioned, you can't guarantee that, but it's not like all 160 homes will be developed, initially. It'll be happening in phases, basically working from Buchanan Estates back out, and there's a potential. We don't, like Mr. Knox said, we don't have any control of those adjacent properties, but there's a potential that, something can be worked out as needed whenever the development gets to that point.
I have just one minor question. On slide 5, when you were showing the images of some of the other properties, one of them had a gravel driveway. But
Yes.
then in the pattern book, when you began to show like elevations and materials, it didn't show a gravel driveway. What, do you have plans?
That's inside Buchanan Estates. There's some homes that have gravel driveways. Mr. Knox, as far as we got their development standards, and we're going to meet or exceed the standards that they have in Buchanan Estates. All his homes will have paved driveways, and that's identified in the book. So that was just basically to show some of the existing home styles that are inside Buchanan Estates, and just, there's a few, not a lot, but a few don't have any sort of a paved driveway.
I just want to make sure that we were all clear what the pattern book intent was.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
We know how many ways are in and out of Buchanan Estates today, how many ingress and egress they've got in there.
Well, you've got, Mike can bring them up. Go ahead.
Down here at Epps Mill, you've got a connection, 2 connections down here, and then over on this side, you've got 2 connections up here, there and there.
About
So
4 or 5.
total of 4 right now, yeah.
Questions this time? This time I'll declare the public hearing open for item number 16-A019, Thoroughbred Construction. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward, and I'll remind you that our time limit is about three minutes. Please state your name and address.
My name is Melissa Malone, and I currently reside at 2613 Cliffside Drive, which is on the corner of Cliffside and Buzzard Branch. So basically, the only thing I have to say is the last time we had this meeting, we were looking at 40 acres at 160 homes, I believe. Now we're looking at 36 acres with 166 homes, with a potential amount of 166 to at least 300 cars in that area on that one street on Cliffside going into Dunbar. So one entrance, one exit. I realize that we have larger streets and things like that, but my concern will forever be and always be the one entrance and one exit into that area. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Greg Goodwin, and I live at 2813 Cliffside, which is on the corner of Cliffside and Dunbar, which is right there where the only entrance is going to be. And if I calculated that, if we say we've got 166 houses at approximately 2 cars per house, we're looking at 332 cars coming into one access right there on Cliffside and Dunbar. That's a lot of cars in one entrance in a 24-hour period. And of course, that also means, some of these cars are going to be coming in here more than 2 or 3 times a day. That's a lot of cars coming in at one time or in one day. That's my biggest concern. If you can find a way of opening up those, I know you don't have access to those right now. Hey, I'm all for this because I have no problem with it. But you would be able to add, once you could add one right there on Buzzard Branch and one right there on Pinion Street right there. You have 3 accesses right there. I don't know when you could do that. Again, you said it could be up to, you could do it tomorrow, you could do it 30 years from now. If we've got 166 houses going in there, that's 30, and we don't have that access for 30 years, that's a whole lot of cars. Plus, we will eventually be adding out from what I understand. So
That's a lot of cars in one area. So my thought is if you could find a way of getting that opened up, those two entrances, we're good to go. And also, if you could have similar lot sizes, that would be less houses, which would be less cars. Those are my two concerns. And I think that's what most of the neighbors are concerned about, because that's a lot of cars coming down there, and a lot of people walk in that neighborhood. A lot of children are out playing in that neighborhood. There's a lot of danger in there. So that's just my thoughts, and I hope you'll consider that. And again, thank you so much.
Doug, while someone else is coming up, 166 houses on the PUD, if we continue, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And if we continue to, Buchanan, just like it is in Buchanan Estates, how many houses would be there? 40 acres.
Wait a minute, how many houses are going to be on on the remainder of Buchanan Estates?
We just continued like Buchanan Estates is now. How many additional houses over the density that's in Buchanan Estates now are we looking at? What's your comparison there?
It's, and you'll have to forgive, I'm not quite sure I'm understanding what you're trying to say.
How many houses would fit with current zoning?
Oh, is that what you're saying? How many houses in RM? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. If you did a gross density.
It's just like Buchanan Estates.
If you were developing it as RM, it'd be about, if you did just the gross acreage, it'd be about 118. That's in a perfect world. Of course, you're not going to get that many. Now with sewer, you'll be able to get closer than if you had septic or even a step system. You'd be able to get closer to that. But if you take out easements, if you take out detention and things like that, you're probably looking closer to about somewhere between 85, 90 lots, roughly speaking, is what you're looking at. That's rough estimate, but of course that would be at 15,000 square foot per lot. Is what you'd be looking at. And sorry, we weren't quite seeing eye to eye on what you were saying. Sorry about that.
I was trying to frame it, where the audience would know. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Roughly, you're almost doubling then, from a practical standpoint.
Roughly speaking,
not
not quite, but getting pretty close. Yes, sir.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Doug, some of our heartburn about the one entrance, and then I'll go back to the tornado that was in Barfield that time and closed up one road, closed up a lot, people getting in and out.
That's a concern from our standpoint as well. And we've relayed that to them. Unfortunately, the fact that he doesn't have access or control of the land around him, he's kind of at the mercy of the adjacent property owners of what he can and can't do. Maybe if the adjacent property owners aren't as willing to actually let him build a full-blown road, maybe the emergency access, kind of like we did at Northside, maybe that is an option to explore at least. Possibility is out there that you say, well, we want to see one of these opened up before Section 2 gets approved, Section 3 gets approved, something like that. But again, that's assuming that he has some amount of control over those other access points, which he doesn't. So, I think maybe the emergency access, similar to what we did to Northside, might be worth exploring. But those are his options at this point. We don't have really anything in the zoning ordinance. This were just come in as an RM subdivision. There's really nothing in the zoning ordinance that says you have to have X amount of access points per number of lots. It does encourage access and connections to surrounding subdivisions when practical. That there is that, but there is not an expressed requirement in the subdivision regulations that say you have to have multiple access points. You have to have one for 50 lots, two for 100. There's nothing like that in the subdivision regulations currently.
I see these. This entire area is going to grow fairly quickly and become much more dense. And with the proposed neighborhood, essentially between this one and Epps Mill Road, it's going to give us the interconnectivity that we're looking for. It's going to add 3 new entrances. And keeping in mind that this neighborhood's not going to develop all in 1 year or even 2 years or 3 years. It's going to take a while to get this done. I'm just looking forward here, and I can see that it's going to work as you look into the future. So I don't have a problem with the one entrance, considering it's going to be short term with these other streets that are going to go in right next door here.
Doug, who owns the land that shows the proposed streets?
I believe that's part of the Buchanan Estates, which I believe is Farrer Brother in partnership.
So the proposed street layout, you got that from those owners?
Correct. That was from that master plan. Now, that might change. I mean, you can tell right now they're not necessarily showing a stub to that land. I mean, that would be easy enough to have them put in, and we would want to see that. Of course, now when they were developing this subdivision, they probably weren't anticipating, this, because that was approved, many years back. So again, I don't foresee that being a real issue. They're showing a stub on the master plan for this development here, but I don't think it'd be difficult to have them do a connection right through there.
What was staff's recommendation?
Since they went with the PUD route, we felt more comfortable with it. We did recommend approval. But, I mean, I understand the concerns that the people have raised with the access points. I mean, we share that concern. Again, under our current subdivision regulations, there is not a requirement for multiple access points. They're encouraged, but there's not a set fast limit for if you have X amount of lots, you have to have X amount of access points. I think personally, I mean, 40 lots, 40 homes in a year is probably kind of aggressive. I'm thinking it might be a little longer than just a 4-year build out. I agree with Mr. Everwater when he said that, it's probably more short term. Can I sit here and say I know exactly what's going to happen? I can't, but I would tend to agree with him. It's probably going to be sooner rather than later that we'll see some of these other sections of the subdivision develop.
Where are they heading towards in Buchanan Estates? Is it back to the west and south of this track, or is it away from this track?
The last northwest. The last couple
part.
sections we've seen have been in the more of the northwest area.
Is there any way to force some sort of phasing in this, that they build 50% of it and then they have to get with some adjacent owner to provide the access? Or
we approved a planned development several years ago. It was Muirwood, actually. There was a condition put in there that they could only develop 60 lots on the first section of that. And it was contingent upon road improvements being made on Rucker Lane. Now, they came back after the fact and did an amendment and took that out because the schedule for that improvement had changed. So, I mean, to answer your question, it wouldn't be the first time we've done something like that.
Lee, are you wanting permanent access or the temporary crash gate type access after say 60 lots or something?
Well, and I had something in my mind, more 60 to 80 lots, and then probably need to work something out from there, especially knowing that Buchanan Estates is going to develop to that west side, that by then should be able to work out some sort of access through there, especially those 2 roads that are available. So
permanent or temporary?
Permanent at that time, but I mean, it can be, it could work on a temporary basis. I think that it could if you can find to access one of those 2 points. I just feel like after that amount, it probably needs a backup.
Probably talking about phase 1. Phase 1 is about 40-something lots, right?
Right.
Of a different angle. The rest of that surrounding, or a lot of that surrounding property is owned by the same developers of Buchanan Estates. How much are we setting the precedence by approving a PUD with 6,000-foot lots? Because I would say if I was going to do the next phase of Buchanan Estates, I'd be shrinking my lot sizes about tomorrow. Because if we approve this with, and that may be fine. I mean, I'm just saying we need to be prepared for that because we're setting the scale at a different place if we approve this. And if I was a developer, I'm saying, hey, why am I putting 15,000 feet in the lot if I can go right over here and just change this and stuff? So we just need to, just thinking out loud here, that we are opening the gate because we haven't approved a lot of developments with this kind of density, you know, and this is going to be pretty dense. But I can go and I can go along with something if there's a number or a phase before there's another set of connection, because it's coming. It's bound to be coming. Those stubs were all put out there for a reason. You know?
But I'm like you, looking at the network, there's a lot of acres to be developed there.
Since this is on city sewer, this has to go through the city also, does it not?
For plat approval, yes, sir. Not for zoning approval like we're doing, but they would have to.
Don't get your critique lot size?
No. They'll assign a zoning classification to it just for purposes of regulations and everything. But as far as the zoning of the property, they don't have to go through a rezoning because this is within our jurisdiction. But if this is approved, they will have to submit all their plats and everything to the city as well as to the county.
But the city can't turn it down because they don't agree with the 6,000-foot lot.
Well, I mean, I guess what they could do is say, well, we're not going to give you sewer access for that. But I believe they've already been talking with the city about what they want to do and have gotten their approvals from them.
Trying to make sure where this is going from here.
Have you discussed it with anyone at city planning?
I mean, I think they're aware of it. Have I had any specific conversations with them about it? No, I haven't. Which, for most zoning cases, now we've got a couple down that is, you know, pretty much surrounded by the city limits that I have had discussions with, but this one's not even an urban growth boundary. So, I mean, they couldn't annex it if they wanted to, this far out.
They've expressed no concern is the main thing.
I haven't heard any concerns from them, that's correct.
We stipulate the number of what phase we want to do at this point in time or when it came back through from the...
I would do it. If you're going to do it, you'd want to do it now because that would go to the county commission with that change into the pattern book.
Doug, I was looking for it online and I can't get to it quickly enough. Will you turn to the section in our regulations that describe the purpose of a PUD? Because what made me think of it is some of the comments that Will made. The purpose is primarily to sort of break up the monotony, protect rural character, you know, add something unique to a parcel of land. It does give us some guarantees that we don't have without it, but at the same time, I don't know that setting up a classic neighborhood and calling it a PUD just to squeeze in more lots was the intent of our PUD zoning. And so will you read that if you can find it?
Now there's the first sentence where it says the PUD district is a distinct zoning district which is intended to encourage innovative land planning and design by avoid the monotony is sometimes associated with large development by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 different subsections, and a couple of them are kind of lengthy. What's that? Just read the.
But you read the headline, which is basically.
Yes, the headline is right. Yes, ma'am. Okay. But it talks about providing flexibility in the application of land development regulations which encourage innovative development, flexibility in architectural design, placement, clustering of buildings, encouraging conservation of natural features, providing efficient use of public facilities, encouraging and preserving opportunities for energy efficient development, redevelopment, promoting attractive functional environments for non-residential. Of course, this is a residential development. Accommodating developments that are exclusively residential or exclusively non-residential or combination. Again, this is a pure residential and allows increases in density beyond what is typically found in conventionally zoned tracts of land.
So besides the 2 acres of green space that is usable for that neighborhood, it doesn't meet any of the other features you just described?
Well, I mean, they've used it to provide some of the flexibility as far as the design. I mean, I guess they're reducing, like in the last subpoint, it says allows for increases in density beyond what is typically found in a conventionally zoned tract of land. I mean, they certainly have that here because this is more dense than what you could find in the RM.
Right, but that's what they get. I'm listening for what
Correct.
does the community get? And so far, I've heard they get 2 acres, and however many years down the road it takes, because it says it's going to be developed in the last phase. So.
I do have a little bit of issue with the density there, because that, if you look at the future, that's right in the middle of that entire development. I mean, it's right there. It needs to either at least be consistent or unique in a way that fits in a little better.
Doug, I'm going to try a motion. Subdivision approval for PUD with emergency ingress and egress with a permanent ingress and egress tie street after 80 lots developed. Does that...
So what you're saying is you want a second access point after 80 lots. Once they hit 80 lots.
Permanent.
Okay. Do you want anything prior to that, or is it just
emergency?
You want to see some sort of emergency egress
construction.
up to 80 lots, but then once they hit 80 lots, you want to see something permanent, or else no other lots. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Okay.
And all staff comments.
Lots would be really close to Phase 2, so instead of just the number of lots, maybe add Phase 2. Would that be appropriate?
If I could interject something real quick.
That'd be fine.
Actually, it might be better to leave the number because phases can change as far as the number of lots in a phase. I'm not saying that he would do this, but they could say, well, Phase 1 is going to be 5 lots, Phase 2 is going to be 5 lots, and okay, I don't know why he would do that, but I would probably be more comfortable with just the number as opposed to the phase. Let him phase it out the way he wants to at that point.
We have a motion and a second. Gail, could you reread that motion so we'll all be on the same page?
I was going to ask it to be repeated, actually. You can repeat it. I've got with the emergency ingress and egress and a permanent after 80 lots. What is that?
Yeah, but basically what he's recommending approval subject to, along with the access on Dunbar, he wants to see some sort of emergency access similar to what we did to Northside Estates. When they hit 80 lots, there needs to be a permanent access, not just a temporary emergency access, a permanent access to one of the other existing streets in the area.
That could even be out another direction.
Yes, it could.
That could even be coming down on the map up there, just as long as there's another way in
Right,
and out.
right.
And so that would be at the latitude.
It gives them
of the
it doesn't tell you where, it just gives them discretion as to where it could be.
Doug, should we define that emergency access a little bit? As I remember on the north side, or we said it had to be, maybe Shot Rock kind of
I think
road.
do it. You could probably make it at the discretion and recommendation of the fire chief, because he's the one that's going to need to really look at that.
Other questions? We have a motion to approve and a second with conditions. All those in favor of the motion to approve item number 16-A019 Thoroughbred Construction, please say aye. Aye. Opposition? Motion to approve carries. Item 6B2, number 17-A004 Penny and Mike Matthews, location 7800 Highway 99. Commission district is 8. County Commissioner is Pettis Reed. Size of the site is approximately 2.5 acres. Tax map is 138. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is OP, office professional. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The applicant's proposing to construct a family medical practice on the property. The applicant will be the provider and will have a staff of 3 other persons, a front desk receptionist, a nurse, and a billing clerk. She also states she'll focus on health prevention and education as well. There is a concept plan that is included with your iPads tonight. Medical clinics are classified as medical services, which are allowed by right in the office professional district, so this use is consistent with that. This property is identified in the Rockvale Rural Center Character Area, which recommends non-residential densities of basically 1.0 floor area ratio, which is a fairly generous FAR. Highway 99 is also identified as an urban corridor under this plan, which recommends roughly the same non-residential density, just a little bit less, but not much. Commercial and mixed uses are contemplated in the rural centers and also along urban corridors. Again, this property is clearly within that node, and there are other non-residential uses in close proximity to the west. There's a gas station, a convenience market, and a post office within about 900 feet of the property. We do feel that the proposal is consistent with the plan. Access would be directly onto Highway 99. Access drives, of course, and parking areas would have to be designed to current county standards. Properties that are zoned office professional are required to install a type 1 buffer when they're adjacent to RM zone property, which is what surrounds this tract. So they will be required to show a landscape plan as well. I will say that the floodplain maps do not show this as located within a 100-year flood area. However, that being said, there is a small creek, stream that backs up on this to the back of this property. When this property was platted back in 2008, there was a finished floor elevation established. Of course, we will watch that. If this is approved, a site plan would be required. Of course, they would have to show detention facilities, drainage, and all that as well. So that is something that we'll keep a close eye on, again, if this is approved. With that, they'll also have to meet performance standards, which create standards for noise, dust, odor, hazardous materials, those kind of things, which are located in our zoning ordinance. Because of this property being within the rural center and along the urban corridor, staff does recommend approval. I did receive a phone call about this from a gentleman that had some concerns about it. I'm not sure if he's here tonight. He might be. If he is, he'll speak. But with that, staff did recommend approval, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for staff at this time?
Doug, with the access point, you said, I guess, would be on 99, obviously. So I'm looking at what they've provided here. I can't really tell. It doesn't look like it lines up with. There's a driveway, yeah, where your cursor is. There's a driveway to the north, but it looks like they're proposing their access point further south.
Right, and what they're providing you is just kind of a rough concept plan. I mean, that'll have to be refined if this is approved. And of course, since this is along a state road, they'll have to get, TDOT approval for any access points. But what they're showing you on there, it's a rough drawing. That access drive is probably like 50 feet wide, the way she has it drawn. Obviously, it's not going to have to be that wide, but we'll take that into consideration as far as where the best points for access are. Of course, we don't want to have an driveway access in our soil area either, so she'll want to, if this is approved, we'll take care of all that.
This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item number 17-A004, Penny and Mike Matthews. Anyone wishing to speak?
Hello, my name is Thad McKellar. I live at 7854 Highway 99. That would be the property directly to the west of the proposed property. My concerns, I'm opposed to it kind of as a residential property. I'm opposed to having, I'm starting to get hemmed in by non-residential properties, as you might see. Once you do that, there's, I only have a few hundred feet from my house to the post office. But my biggest concern, and I probably need to give some background. My wife's family's owned this property since 1954 till 2004 when it was sold off. I have lived on this property, including the property in question and the next 3 tracks over. It was all one property until 1999 when we broke off and built the house that he's pointing at right there with the long curvy driveway. As I've lived there many, many years, I have seen significant water issues. These fields, you can see it kind of lines up with the tree line in between my property and the other 4 properties there. That's a drainage ditch, and when it rains and does a significant rain event, those fields right there can fill up with, I've seen as much as 1.5 foot of water in them. And I have picture evidence I inadvertently took that shows that there's clearly water in that field. I'm looking at it from the other side. From Salem View Court, we had a big event, and water was about to spill over from this side at the corner of Salem View and 99. And so I took a picture that way, and you can see, as far as the eye can see, glimmers of water all the way down that field, because that field is the lowest point on that whole, what used to be one farm, the whole property. And now, when the overflow, it's not a wet creek, it only gets water when it rains. But when it starts to fill up, those properties are basically at the same level as the bottom of that overflow creek or lower in some parts. And when it starts to flow over, it can flow over up to 100 feet over into those fields and be 1.5 foot deep. So my concern obviously is when you start getting a minimum pad elevation, minimum floor, finished floor elevation, and you try to meet that along with the 50-foot conservation area, you start pushing that water. What's it going to do to my property? The picture I also have, I didn't provide a video picture. I don't know if I'm allowed to do handouts or not, but it showed water starting to come up into my property, which is substantially higher than that property, which is why I built on it when I owned it, all of it at one time. So I'm very concerned about what this is going to do to push that water back onto me when you start making these corrections. Not all land is designed to be built on, but I've tried to buy it, and several times it's gone up for auction, and I tried to buy it, but knowing what I know about it, I knew everybody that was buying it was paying too much for the property based on what it was going to cost. I've been a builder for 30 years. And I know what it costs to raise a property and then also meet the requirements. The proposed design has even got, obviously it's got issues because it's got the building in the septic field and different things like that. So I certainly don't want to be hemmed in by office professional and commercial. I understand they're not exactly the same, but that it is a commercial use. And then also more importantly to me, is what's going to happen when you start engineering that water and constricting its flow, which the fields are really part of its flow, in my opinion. That's all I have.
You want to address those water concerns, Mike? What would happen?
We would address that at the site plan review stage. They would have to live up to the pad and floor requirements that was established for the property on the final plat, and we would, look at pre-development, post-development runoff, make sure it meets all our requirements, and also water quality requirements if they are over 15,000 square feet of a new impervious area.
My name is Jessica Hood, and we own the property map number 138, parcel 307. It's like right in front of it. The issue that I have is also the water as well. We are actually building kind of as far back on that hill as possible before you hit the tree line. And the reason why we did that is because in the front of our property, when it rains, it stays. And I also know that with that being said, it is, I guess from a personal kind of perspective, it's disheartening to know that we just purchased our property and currently building a house where we are. We just purchased it in December, and the last thing we wanted to see was something like that go right across the street. So that's a little disheartening to hear that. And then the other thing too is I'm not sure really what ended up working out, but I know that the original owners had a lot of discrepancy with myself, Consolidated Utility, and then my contractor about the tap that we put in. Come to find out, they didn't have their perks where they needed to have them, and they needed to push them back, is what I was understanding. I do know that CUD ended up working everything out. I know that the state had to come in and approve where they were putting the tap at and going underneath Highway 99. I wasn't actually supposed to be here tonight. My husband was supposed to come here, but unfortunately he got the flu, so here I am dressed in my mom attire. But the other concern that I think that we had was my girls go to school at Rockville, and traffic there is terrible, Rockville, and I know that they're going to be building a high school that got approved as well. And right now that's a 2-lane road. That's not a 4-lane road. And it could really be used probably as a 4-lane road eventually. I'm not sure if that'll ever happen. But like I said again, we wanted to be right outside city limits purposely to not be next to something that is commercial. And Murfreesboro is growing quite a bit. And we purposely saved our money for 5-6 years when we moved here to go county. So it would be a little disheartening to see it occur. And then again, the water, like just last week when it rained, it really rained, and that entire area was just saturated and the water sat. So anyways, that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Ferris, and I'm currently building a house on my son-in-law's property there, or a piece of what was our home place. My father and mother owned the entire 22.5 acres, and I was born and raised on that. And the only comment I have is that when I was a kid, we stood at the back door of our home and we watched water probably 16 to 2 foot deep running across that entire tract of property. And you can engineer and you can build it up, but when you do, you're going to displace it, as you well know, and it's got to go somewhere. And so I've seen it go all the way from the front of Highway 99 all the way to the rear of that property, covering more than half of that entire tract that they're discussing right now. So that's my only comment.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Christopher Roden, I own the property 7779 Highway 99, directly across from this location. Purchased the house 3 years ago. It was all land behind me. I've got the new development that the lady was up here speaking of. I've got the development that's going to be going beside them, and the development that's already built that's across my property. That's all directly across this property that they're wanting to propose to build. I bought the place because I want it to be residential, never to be commercial. If this did go through and it becomes commercial, what's going to happen to let the easement of new commercial properties go directly beside me, across the street? The property that is beside me is 23 acres now, zoned as commercial potential. Mr. McAllis, I think it is, never met the man, but just like he said, my property yields the water that he's collecting. When it rains, you walk out my back driveway, I'm afraid my garages are going to flood because there's still water draining for 2 more days running across the driveway. So the Matthews they're hearing about this water problem tonight. That's good news. They need to put that in their development. But for me, going as a commercial, how do we let something go commercial today and say, hey, I understand the growth of Rutherford County. It's growing outside of Murfreesboro. It's going to happen. I may sell this property later, but I bought this property with my 2 kids to go to Rockville. They're attending, go to the new high school that's being built, then end up going to MTSU. So I've got the property that I own that you see with the concrete long driveway there with the house and the shop. That's what I own. And you're saying, well, that's nothing to deal with you. You're across the street. But you look at, all right, what's going to go across the street today? What's going to be in a year? I understand there's a gas station, there's a post office, but then you look at potential commercial means there's got to be some kind of sewer coming. When is the city going to zone commercial beside me that is to the top right there? That's potential commercial. All of a sudden now you've got the capability, if you brought sewer in and got everybody off septic, once that happens, it's just going to grow. We can't stop that. You've got a large enough facility there beside me that could become apartment complex, something that's not large, but 23 acres can easily house that. Now it's like, all right, I've just lost the house I bought to raise my family with. So I just want to give everybody my opinion of that. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one else, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Mike, you got any initial comments on what you know about this property?
It's a challenging piece of property. I mean, it'd be challenging to build a house on it. I think the plat had a 686 minimum pad elevation, and the existing ground is around 680 in the middle of it. So there's a lot of fill that they'll have to bring in to make that work. And I think the high ground is their soils area, right here up front. So it's going to be a difficult site to develop. Not impossible, but difficult.
Doug, what else is allowed in this zoning?
An office professional or RM? Office professional? Let me just open up my ordinance here. No residential uses are allowed as far as that goes. Community facility activities like churches, something like that could be there. Community assembly, administrative services, just kind of looking down the list here, cultural, recreational services like museums, something like that. Personal group care facilities, by right, what they call consumer repair services. Not anything really in the way of retail. No retail would be allowed, even the less than 5,000 square feet. So you're talking really more of the office type uses, nothing from a retail standpoint.
And sanitary sewer is about 1.5 miles away up at the Rockville school sites.
Mike, I know they can't have any more post-runoff than pre-runoff, but what about volume? If that's basically a detention area now and they fill, do they have to put in the same amount of volume in a pond, or we just look at the water leaving the site, which could be different than volume itself?
Right. We could look at it both ways. We have required that they engineers look at the volume of runoff as well. And I see what the...
What about volume of capacity more than volume of runoff? How much water is that site holding?
Oh, yes, sir.
If that's a low area, that's an inadvertent detention area at this point in time. I mean, if they fill X amount of cubic feet of fill on the front of the property, they have to go in the back and dig that much detention area, because that is almost a neighborhood detention area from what I can see and what I can hear and what little bit I know about that area. The whole area seems to flow down right there. Do they have to recreate the same amount of volumes already there?
It's going to be difficult because the soils, the septic soils are up front here towards the road, and you could see the flow path that water does take through here and through here. So if they build this area up, it's going to be a challenging site.
Well, Will's talking about how much water does it hold. How deep of a retention pond will they have to maintain the amount of water that stays there now to when they build on it?
Right. We encourage, and actually the state wants us to capture the first inch of rainfall and infiltrate it to mimic the existing ground conditions of a field or a forest. But this is something that the engineer will have to look at, the design engineer, and make recommendations to us that we'll review at the site plan stage. So I mean, most likely with this being the low area, you've got to put a building somewhere, parking somewhere, but leave your suitable soils alone, so you've got septic system capacity. So I mean, it's and the configuration of the lot, it's going to be a challenging site. I can't give you a direct answer. I'd have to design it myself.
Thank you, Mike. I got all that. I didn't say waist deep or over my head, or we're going to have to build a fence around this detention pond, or what.
I've been handed some diamonds in the rough myself.
Which way is your water flow there, Mike?
To the northeast.
To the north and east, or east?
I have several technical concerns with this. If you're saying that it's about 6 feet below what the pad elevation has got to be, that's a lot of fill. With this site plan, and I understand this is just proposed and they're going to have to redo this, but with what you're telling me, this site plan can't even be close to what's going to work. With 6 feet of fill, you can't fill in over your septic field. So that septic field's got to stay low. Of course, you can't have your septic tank in that field. They have their parking lot and their building drawn into the soil site. This means the building's got to be relocated. The parking lot's got to be put somewhere. You've still got to get buffers around the perimeter, and you need a detention pond. Now, if you're going to raise 6 feet and you've got a 50-foot conservation area, that's going to be a lot of slope between that conservation area and the building, and the building is just within a couple of 3 feet now the way that it's drawn. But Mike, how many feet away does that building have to be from that? If you've got a slope that can't go in the conservation area, 6 feet of fill, how many feet away is that building going to have to be from that conservation area?
They're usually, about on the ditch line, where the conveyance.
The conservation easement there that's 50 feet, and you have to have 6 feet of fill there that has to go like this.
It's 3 to 1, so
3 to 1, so 18 feet away from that conservation area with the soil, they're out of space.
Yeah.
And my concern is if we rezone this OP and they find out that they can't make it work, we've got this piece of property out there, OP, that nobody can use, but it's going to pay taxes at a higher rate. And I know the county's not going to like that. I mean, the county's going to love that, but the landowner's sure not going to like that. I have concerns about it with the way that it's presented here. I'm not sure that it's feasible.
Doug, what happens if we zone it and they can't make it work?
Then it stays zoned that way. I mean,
Then we
really,
got a piece of property zone commercial services,
Office professional.
that doesn't allow residential. I guess
Right.
they come back and rezone again, but.
if they wanted to build a house there, then they would have to. That's right.
I can appreciate the neighbors saying they don't want to behave in commercial, but the node's right there. I mean, the post office, the store, what's in the other building, I think the trailer shop now, I mean, that node's been there forever. I mean, I'm ready to fight for it with them over the water, but I really can't personally be against the zoning that when the other stuff is right there in the picture, right there. We're right there in that node. I think this was in the comprehensive plan as being non-residential, was it not? So it's
shown in
not
that
like
node,
we're changing
mixture of
shifts,
uses.
changing gears at the 11th hour here for that part of it. But I do have a worry about if we do this and it doesn't work, as what we're saying. You get the right slope from the building toward the conservation easement. So it's that 3 to 1 slope. They're 6 feet up. That's, do the math, it's gonna be 18 feet away or something like that minimum, then you're gonna use up this site pretty fast, and it's gonna be hard to make it work.
Would a residential be required to be that same 1 foot above as well?
Well, actually, residential units, it's the maximum, if it's in a floodplain, it'll be 3 feet above the base flood elevation. Now, again, this is not in the flood zone, so would they have to adhere to that finished floor elevation that was established on the plat? Yes, they would.
Would your challenges be as great, Mike, if you were building a house there?
Not so much. I mean, you're not going to have a large parking area.
Wouldn't have a parking lot.
No, not parking lot, just a driveway and a place to pull in the house.
If somebody were filling for a house, would they have to do pre and post drainage, just like a commercial development?
Well, usually
Somebody come
not
in and
on a
fill-
large tract
fill
of land like this.
And fill a portion of his lot for a house, they could put more water on a neighbor than somebody doing a design system with drainage ponds and stuff like that. We have more control over the finished product if it were zone commercial.
When there's just a minimum pad requirement like this, it'll be noted on with building codes and with our zoning compliance forms, and that's essentially left to the builder to make sure and the building codes to make sure the elevations are met.
I tend to agree. I think it's within the node, and outside of that, outside of the water issues, I have no issue with the proposed rezoning whatsoever. With what Mike's telling us, we may have a little more control over it if it is a commercial entity or office professional versus a residential. It may be an opportunity to fix a problem for everybody, depending on how it's engineered out. I understand the challenges. It's right there before us, but I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
Second. Have a motion to approve and a second. Now we're open for further discussion.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment, and I understand the neighbor's heartburn, but we have in Las Casas a pharmacy, and it did contain a clinic, and it contains an optician upstairs, and it's really in residential area, and nobody notices it. It was a very good design. It looks like a house, but the traffic flow is not consequential relative to a subdivision. So for that reason, I second it. And to Chip's point, it may be this way, it may be a way to fix a problem rather than doing a single family and causing more problem.
Doug, I have a question. I know there have been times in the past when we've had engineering information that says, yes, this property can be engineered to take care of the water, but you have neighbors who have a lot of anecdotal history, like they shared tonight. And so it's one of those gambles. And so sometimes we have requested like a hydrologist report. When would that be appropriate? I mean, this sounds like just an extreme case of concern for the water for the neighbors. I don't know in terms of just the zoning and the small portion of land if it justifies that. I'm just curious to know, is that anything that would make all of our heartburn feel a little better?
I mean, I think to answer your question would be if that's something that you feel the commercial, or what's not commercial, the non-residential zoning hinges upon. If you wouldn't mind so much if it was just going to be a house, it's not as big of an issue, but if you are wanting a higher comfort level to recommend a different zoning classification, then it's probably something you should do before recommending approval or denial of a rezoning application at this stage. If that is the case, and if the commission wanted to do that, they could defer this application until next month, ask the applicant to get that information together, and then present it back to staff for us to look at and ultimately back to the commission. If you just make the recommendation now, I guess you could pass it on to the county commission with the intent of them doing it between now and the county commission meeting, still moving it forward. That's a possibility as well, but I guess it depends on how strongly you feel about that. If it really, in your mind, if your recommendation is hinging upon can they handle the water here, and we really want to see this report, then you should probably do it before you recommend to the county commission. That'd be my advice. Mike, if you want to chime in.
I think this is one of those cases where we see a lot of issues that may not have been thought through by the applicant completely, and we may just be doing them a favor by asking them to step back and having some engineering work before they get this solid rezoned and start paying a higher property tax rate. I just think that there's an awful lot of boogeymen hiding in the closet here that are about to jump out on them.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 17-A004 for Penny and Mike Matthews. All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. All those opposed? We've got some really weak ayes and some really weaker nays, so call a roll for you, if you would, Gabby.
Rhonda Allen. Jim Averwater. Lee Bogle. David Jones. Will Jordan. Craig Lynch. Chip Pinion. Mike Vaught. Jeff Phillips.
Aye.
4 yeses, 5 noes.
Motion to approve fails. We don't do anything.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to deny.
Thank you. We have a motion to deny.
Personally, I was hoping to make a motion to defer and let them come back next month with that study. That's why I voted no on the previous one. That's what I would, so I'm not, that's where I was hoping where we're going.
Mr. Chair, in deference to other opinions here, I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll make a motion we defer this to next month, let them come in with a more intense study, work with staff to see if the water problems can be handled.
I'll second that.
Second to defer, hinging upon a geotechnical evaluation of the problem.
Drainage, drainage study. Yeah.
Clear? Any questions? All those in favor of the motion to defer, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. Thank you. Doug, can you get with the applicant and make sure they know what they're supposed to do?
Yes, sir. Glad to.
Item 6B3, number 17-A005, James Rowland, location 1773 New Salem Road. Commission district is 7, which is County Commissioner Mike Cush. Size of the lot is approximately 29 acres, tax map 102 and 113. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is commercial services, CS. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Before we continue on this, if you look at that map, and let's see if we could highlight those tracks that we're looking at here. Excuse me. Let me get to my map real quick here. It's those 3. And that little one, yeah. Just a small discrepancy I wanted us to point out in the the agenda. The staff comments that we did on this actually labels that third tract. As you see the map that's in your agenda materials as well. The agenda, the front page of it, we forgot to put, or I forgot, I won't blame anybody else, I forgot to put the parcel 5.13 in there as well. That's actually owned by the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department. It's a location of a pump station. It's no longer in use. I've had conversations with the Water and Sewer Department staff. They are aware of this request. They're okay with what's being proposed. They're actually in negotiations to sell this property back to the applicants. It's not really being used for anything anymore, but I just wanted to point that out, that on the front page of the agenda, that wasn't listed on there, that small tract, but in the staff comments, it is listed, so I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that that was part of it, so there was no confusion there. The property that we're looking at here was the subject of an annexation and zoning request into the city of Murfreesboro back in 2016. It was for a multifamily development. Ultimately, those requests were withdrawn by the applicant. They are now requesting the county planning commission and county commission to look at a commercial services zoning. Just so everybody's aware, there is not a residential element allowed in the commercial services zone, with the exception of a living unit inside the business. I mean, that's permitted in all the commercial zones, but as far as single-family, multifamily, anything beyond that, it is not permitted. According to the information provided by the applicant, they'd like to rezone this property to commercial services to construct mini warehouses on a portion of the property. Mini warehouses, as we've seen in the past, are classified as general personal services in our zoning ordinance and are required to have a special exception in the commercial services zone. The applicant is aware that if this is approved, they will have to have an additional step to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Portions of tax map 113, as you can see on the map that's on the screen there. Mike, could you turn off the floodplain just for a second? Turn on the city limits. Okay, thank you. When you look at the orange is all the city limits of Murfreesboro. You'll see that there are a couple of small slivers of land that are actually on these tracts that has already been annexed into the city. Conversation with city officials indicate that when the property on the corner was foreclosed upon, the actual limits of apparently the legal description and everything were different than what the property lines on the GIS showed, so that's why it's a little bit different right there, why there's portions in that in the city right in that area. It's a little unusual, but I wanted to at least point that out to you. There's not been any kind of a concept plan with this zoning request. Access could be either from Barfield Road or New Salem Highway in this area. Of course, if they were to do it off New Salem Highway, they would have to get state approval, as that is part of Highway 99. Their access and parking areas would be required to meet county specifications. At this point, to our knowledge, they're not asking for city sewer. If they would probably be annexed into the city. This area is shown as being located in the general urban character area in our comprehensive plan. And again, Highway 99 is identified as an urban corridor under the plan. The Salem land use study that was completed by the city of Murfreesboro back in 2001 also recommends what's called community commercial plan development node and a mixed use limited plan development node on this property, so commercial uses on this. City officials have indicated a preference to serve the property with city sewer, but considering its proximity to the existing city limits, they've also indicated that commercial zoning is more appropriate than the residential zoning. They've also talked with their engineering and traffic staff. They'd also like a chance to review any plans, since the rights-of-way of both those roads are within the city limits, and their engineering staff also would like a chance to look at the grading plans. From our standpoint, I mean, it really makes sense for this to be commercially zoned. It's recommended that way in both our plan and the Salem land use plan. It's in very close proximity to the interstate interchange at Highway 99 and I-24. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I don't think we received any phone calls that I personally took on this particular application.
Doug, I think I missed part of you said something about a previous annexation, conversation about annexation?
Yes, this land.
I'm wondering why it's not just being annexed in the city and done.
Well, I mean, I think you need to ask the applicant for more detail on that, but they did ask for annexation into the city. They were going for a multifamily zone. Of course, there's a moratorium now on multifamily development, so they're asking for commercial services in the county now. The applicant could provide you some more background as far as his conversations with city officials regarding that annexation and zoning request.
Questions for staff? Did you think it appropriate to hear from the applicant first? Is Mr. Rowland or Representative Mr. Rowland here?
Thank you, Chairman Phillips, Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. Mr. Rowland's here for possibly some more detailed explanations, but I'd like to walk through the least answer to that question as far as why not annexation through the city currently. I was working with Mr. Rowland when we tried to pull it through the city the first time, and that was for an apartment complex, a developer in hand. At that point, the city of Murfreesboro put a moratorium on any kind of multifamily development in terms of apartments, so that kind of slowed that whole process down. That was a little bit over a year ago. And after revisiting the site with Mr. Rowland, he feels like the CS zoning would more than accommodate the needs that he has for that particular development, especially in lieu of using it for self-storage. So there won't be any need for the sewer system that would be provided by the city at this point. So that's the answer to why he's not pursuing the annexation again. It's primarily because CS zoning within the county serves his purposes. And as far as I just want to, as Doug mentioned, this is less than a quarter mile from the interchange of 99 and I-24. Across the street's commercial highway. All around it's, not all around it's commercial highway. There's some residential, but it's divided by the river. So on the other side, where you see residential abutting this property, it's really, there's a major geographical river that separates those two spaces. And with two frontages along Barfield and 99, we feel like it's more than appropriate zoning to ask for with the CS. I'm available for any other questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ready for our public hearing? This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item number 17-A005 for James Rowland. Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve.
Doug, one question before motion. What else can go in besides the mini warehouses?
I mean, a variety of different retail, office uses. It's not the most wide open of the three commercial zones. It's kind of in the middle of the road. There's quite a few different uses that they could do in it. Wide variety of different retail uses.
Motion to approve and a second.
But it can't be overcome.
Doug, I know this is in the part that's in the shaded yellow. Directly across the street, is that a school, a church? What is
That's
that?
World Outreach Church, part of World Outreach.
Okay.
Other questions? We have a motion and a second to approve item number 17-A005 for James Rowland. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. This will be heard before the full County Commission on Thursday, April the 13th, 6:30 p.m. in this room. Item 6B4, number 17-A006, Stuart Aaron Carlton. Location is 14141 Highway 99, Commission District 8. The County Commissioner is Pettis Reed. Size of the site is approximately 2.7 acres. Tax map is 145. Existing zoning is RL, residential low density. Proposed zoning is RMF, residential multifamily.
Yes, Mr.
I believe we have a petition. That
Yes.
Most of you may have a copy of on your bench, petition against.
Yes, sir. Thank you. According to information provided by the applicant, they'd like to rezone the property to RMF in order to build 3 brick duplexes, 2-bedroom, 1-bath on the property. Access and parking would be to the rear of all the units, along with a communal space for the residents and surrounding area. You've got several attachments on your iPads that you can take a look at. The applicant also states that he and his mother would live in 2 of the units, which are existing. There's an existing house and a small apartment on the property, while renting out the remaining units. The applicant, again, has submitted several sheets of supporting documentation that you can see. Multifamily zoning would allow for up to 10 units per acre. It's 6,000 square feet minimum lot area for the first dwelling, plus 4,000 square feet per additional dwelling unit. Based on this formula, this property could accommodate up to 29 units. Now, that being said, there would have to be enough septic soil in order to accommodate that many, and enough for parking, landscaping, and screening. I highly doubt you could ever get that kind of density on that property. Again, access for the 3 of the proposed duplexes would be off of Mount Vernon Road. The existing house and apartment would be continue to be accessed from Highway 99. Being that this would be changing to a multifamily property, all the access drives and parking areas would have to be built to county standards, current standards, including paving. They would also be required to put a Type 1 buffer adjacent to any residentially zoned property, RL zoned property, which they'd have to show a landscaping plan along with a site plan that would be required for this. This is residential zoning, so this would not require any adherence to the performance standards. This property is located within the rural character area in our comprehensive plan, which recommends residential densities of 1 unit per acre. The proposed application of what he's proposing would be closer to 3 units an acre. Of course, ultimately, it could be up to 10 again if you actually went with the gross density of that zone. While the zoning ordinance and the plan did anticipate areas within the RL and rural area that could accommodate greater densities, we have seen some subdivisions that had better access to water and maybe a step system soil, those kind of things. The RMF allows more units, I think, than really what the comprehensive plan was contemplating. I think it was really what we allow in the zoning ordinance in the RL district is if it has adequate fire protection for hydrants and has access to either a sewer or step system, they can build at an RM density, which is up to 3 units an acre. This, again, not up to what the RMF would allow in that zone. The zoning ordinance also states that the RMF zone is appropriate in the general urban character area and not the rural area. So for those reasons, staff did recommend denial of this request. And in fairness, we pretty much told the applicant that when they first applied, that we weren't getting what I would call the warm fuzzies about this application. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I will say, while people are thinking of questions, yes, there is a petition, as Chairman Phillips had stated. I have received some phone calls in support of this as well, so I don't want to discount those.
Doug, that being on a corner lot, it would have dual frontage setbacks, would it not?
Yes.
And it would also, 6 units would require 6 septic systems and then enough space for 6 duplicate systems. I mean, I don't see how they would physically make it all work on that lot anyway.
Right. Now, as far as the setbacks are concerned, there is
That's just
the
talking
front.
about 6 units,
right.
not a higher number.
Right. Now, as far as the setbacks go, yes, they will have to have, there is an alternate side setback now. They might be able to get a little closer. They don't have to have necessarily 2 front setbacks anymore, but it's...
6 full-blown septic systems and enough space for 6 duplicate systems. That's... I don't remember last time we zoned anything for multifamily or duplex.
We haven't.
In my tenure, I don't think we have a single time in my 15 years. But there are some reasons why. They just don't work very well on septic systems. That's why all that kind of stuff is usually on sewer.
And I will say this about the multifamily zone, the RMF. When we comprehensively rezoned the county a few years ago, there are some existing areas that were primarily duplexes or something like that, that we did zone that just to make them compliant with the zoning. But as far as anybody coming in to request an RMF zone, we've only seen really this one and the one on that property we considered a little earlier. There's, like you said, it's difficult to have multifamily units when you're on septic. There's usually just not enough soil there to make it work. And quite frankly, in a county, there's just not a whole lot of areas where I think it's really appropriate. There may be some areas around the college where it's in the county, some areas around there that are predominantly duplex type uses, multifamily uses anyway to the east of Rutherford Boulevard. There may be some areas in there that might be appropriate. They'd have to be rezoned because they're all pre-existing. But when you start getting out into the more rural areas, this is a hard zone for me to recommend approval of.
Questions for staff? Ready for a public hearing. This time we'll declare a public hearing open for item number 17-A006, Stuart Aaron Carlton And it might be wise if we heard from the applicant first, if he has anything to say.
Good evening. Aaron Carlton, I'm the applicant for this property. A couple of things, a little bit of background on this property. So I bought the property back in 2012. I was actually working overseas at the time. My sister lived in the house, and then a cousin lived in the apartment beside it. I'm a seventh generation Rutherford County resident. My grandfather and great-grandfather, et cetera, all lived here in the area. Matter of fact, on the corner of the property, there used to be a general store that had 2 small apartments in it that my grandfather lived in 1936 when he started school at Eagleville Elementary School. So there was that. It did have, I guess, like a multi-family unit on it at one time. And then down the road on Mount Vernon Road, just south of Highway 99, a cousin of mine, Joe Frank Carlton, owned a duplex. He had put a duplex there and had rented it out for several years until he sold it, I think, back in 2010. It's no longer used as a duplex. The resident has it as a single-family home, but just to show that there was some precedent for multifamily units out there. So my plan, like Mr. DeMoste had said, was to build a couple of duplexes out there. I own some other rental properties in Eagleville, and I just see a lot of demand for rental units out there, people that want to be outside of Murfreesboro or outside of Franklin, but they don't want to have the maintenance of an entire home or entire yard to keep up. So that was my purpose of trying to do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of middle ground. You either have an option to do single-family homes on, half an acre or so, or multifamily units, which are or medium high density, which I don't feel like there's, like I said, there's no real middle ground for it, because obviously, I don't want to put a ton of units on there, which it's not possible with the soils and septics, but it is a little bit more than what you can do with single-family homes. That's really all that I have. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me or. All right, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, my name is Sonia Hill. I live at 11250 Mount Vernon Road, about approximately 1 mile from where this is planning to be built. We moved here almost 5 years ago. My husband retired from the military, and we wanted to live out in the country because we lived on top of everybody living in military housing. We didn't want to move out into the county for all of a sudden to have multi-rental property right down the street from where we're living. We feel that this will affect the property value, since that's the first thing you see when you leave 99 going on to Mount Vernon Road, where there's some there are little single units, and then there's bigger tracts of land with property. I own almost 7 acres. Also, with the current rate of people that are moving into Middle Tennessee, I'm afraid that this precedent of building multi-family dwellings will make it more easy for this area to get larger units. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Vivian Spencer, and I live at 11876 Mount Vernon Road. I was raised in the area around Mount Vernon. My family cemetery is right next to the property that he is proposing to develop. And my main concern is the property of the cemetery. I have a fear, too, that what is going to keep him from developing these duplexes, I call them, into government-subsidized housing. You said there's going to be 2 entrances to the property and to the houses, and one is off Mount Vernon Road. And I don't know if you are aware of it, but the water gets up on Mount Vernon Road when it rains. And it is better since they fixed the road, but when we had the floods in Nashville, you couldn't even pass, and it got over the main new road of Highway 99. And I'm also concerned about the property value, how it will affect our property on Mount Vernon Road. Thank you.
Can you point out, Doug, where that cemetery is? It's right here.
South.
It's not part of the subject property. It's on an adjacent parcel right to the south.
So the access to that cemetery is not through this property?
Correct. It's got an access drive directly onto Mount Vernon.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Brian Tedrow. I live at 11576 Mount Vernon. Bought the place back in 2013 with the intent to stay away from this type of development. My wife had a house in town, Walton Drive, and at one point it was a nice, quiet neighborhood behind Bellwood. Now at this point, people by attrition are dying off, and it has become rental property. And then you got people moving in, moving out. It's not a stable neighborhood anymore. You got kids in and out, theft, and we're worried about the property value. And I'd like everybody to take that in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Carlton, you have something else to add?
I just want to address real quick the concerns of property value. Obviously, with me owning land there, I'm also concerned about that. Just some research that I've done on it is that property value, if you have rental properties, that the property value really depends on the owner of the rental properties and how they manage it. If you have a, if you will, a slumlord that just kind of lets the property go, then rental values will go down. But if you have someone who's taking care of the property, then the property values in the area generally tend to go up. The other thing I wanted to address was low-income housing. This is not something that I would ever want to be low-income housing. What I'm typically trying to look at is older people who, because this is what I have when I do rent a property out. I see a lot of elderly people who have kids or grandkids in the area, and they want to be closer out there, but again, they don't want to have the maintenance of an entire home that they have to deal with. So just two things, and thank you guys for coming out and expressing your concerns. I appreciate it.
Anyone else?
My name is Jennifer King. I live at 11576 Mount Vernon Road. I would be the one that started the petition against this development on the corner. The rental property, slumlord, I believe as Mr. Carlton called it, the people who leave mattresses, toys, bicycles, tires. They leave trash all over the yard. The owner of the property is never there to clean it up. In the city, which I lived on Walton Drive in Murfreesboro, the city would come and pick up the trash that everybody would leave behind. Out there, we don't have that. The elderly people who want to live out there, I mean, there's no hospital nearby. There's no grocery store open late. There's one pharmacy that's closed at 6 o'clock. And there's a playground and a basketball court coming in on this development, and I don't know of elderly people who want to use basketball courts and a playground. So that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Doug, what would stop the applicant from cutting his 2.7 acres up into another lot or two if he wanted to put additional properties on there?
As long as he met the conditions of the subdivision regulations in that zone, nothing.
Well, he
We
could-
actually talked about that.
He could do something more with his property instead of what he's doing
Yes, sir,
now.
he could.
While I appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit of the applicant, I feel like this is inappropriate to have multifamily zoning at this point in property, and he does have the option to do something more with his property as just stated, and with that, I'll make a motion to deny.
And the second to deny item number 17-A006 for Stuart Aaron Carlton. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to deny, please say aye. Any opposition? The motion to deny carries. This will still be scheduled to be heard before the full county commission on Thursday, April the 13th, 6:30 p.m. in this courtroom. Item 6B5, 17-A007, Burke Shelton. Location is 10596 Rockvale Road, Commission District 8. This is getting to be real familiar territory, Pettis. And the county commissioner is Pettis Reed. Size of the site is approximately 3 acres, tax map 146. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is a PUD, planned unit development for a landscaping company. This might look familiar to most of you. I guess with that, Doug, in your hands.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. As Mr. Phillips stated, this should look pretty familiar to you. I'll be more than happy to go into the background of everything if you'd like me to. If not, I can just kind of catch you up with the most current events. Of course, this was originally brought back in November of 2016. After considering the concerns from those who spoke, Plan Commission deferred this application to ask them to pursue a plan development. After discussion with staff, they still moved forward with the commercial services, which was ultimately denied back in December of last year. After that meeting, staff met with the applicant and discussed the possibility of a plan development application, which they ended up deciding to pursue. Consistent with Chapter 9 of the zoning ordinance, the applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting on January 30th of this year at the Rockvale Community Center. This meeting was well attended by residents of the area, as well as Commissioner Reed of that district. The concerns that were brought up included the appropriateness of the commercial use along the corridor, septic issues on the property, possible flooding issues, and what would become of the existing mobile home on the property. There was also some just questions about general process that staff answered as well. According to information submitted by the applicant, his company, Outdoors Unlimited, again, has been operating in Rutherford County for about 10 years, over 10 years. He plans to employ up to 25 people at peak season and maintain a workforce of 6 people year-round. The property will be used for the storage and maintenance of equipment along with office work. There is an existing single-family a trailer on the property, but the applicant shows that that is to be removed in their pattern book. The building is shown on the applicant's concept plan in the pattern book, along with some future improvements, cover storage, and some parking areas. Again, the pattern book that I reference is on your iPads for your review, and I know the applicant will have a presentation similar to the one he gave a little earlier on our first rezoning application. As far as access and landscaping, everything really here is unchanged from the original applications that he was making. I will say that one of the issues that we had as staff had to do with the soils on the property. There's been a lot of discussion regarding the usability of the existing tank and system on the property. We addressed that in our staff comments. You'll see that there was a record of an original system being installed back in the 70s, 1971. There was a repair permit issued to a previous owner, and Mr. Skelton himself performed the repair after he purchased the property. A TDEC inspector visited the property and had Mr. Skelton expose the field line areas and identified approximately 300 feet of septic lines. Now, I want to be clear that the inspection did not constitute an approval from TDEC. It simply confirmed that there was a system in place. The state has no objection to using an existing sanitary sewer disposal system, what I identify as I abbreviate SSDS, regardless of criteria, design criteria, or existence of records to that effect. But that being said, approval of any site plan, should this development be approved, would have to require soil mapping to ensure a new use that he is proposing could be accommodated with the existing soil system on the property. The applicant did have a soil scientist come out to the property about a week or so ago and has identified another area. Now, we haven't seen just all the paperwork on that yet, but from what he's telling us, yes, indeed, they did find some more soils on that property. There is no portion of this property that's located within the 100-year floodplain as delineated by FEMA. It does back up to Concord Creek. The reason the FEMA maps don't show is because they stopped the study further down, about 1.5 miles downstream of the property. Probably, if this is approved, any site plan would just need to show us an analysis just to make sure that any possible flooding issues would be reduced on the property, maybe even some flood-proofing measures on the building. That's something we can address at that time should this be approved, and I know our engineering staff and planning staff will work closely with him on that. Talking about the comprehensive plan, we've done that a lot tonight. This area is shown in the suburban belt character area. It is not within the Rockvale development node. That being said, the comprehensive plan does recommend densities for non-residential development. So the plan does anticipate commercial uses if they are appropriate to the area. There is existing commercial zoning in close proximity to this property, as well as an additional one that was just rezoned on Jackson Ridge Road, about 1,000 feet to the west of this property as the crow flies. I know that again, the applicant does have his representative has a presentation he'd like to make, and of course staff will be here to answer any questions. There was some information that was passed out as well from one of the neighbors in the area, that should be on your tables. So again, we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
That information also contains the petition. Doug, if you would briefly explain the difference between the commercial application and the PUD.
Yes, sir, be happy to. The applicant is asking for a planned development. Now, similar to the application we saw a little earlier in the agenda, planned development is more specific. It allows for more control on the county's end, allows for more design ability and creativity, if you will, on the applicant's ability. Probably the biggest change between the two is if for some reason, if this is approved and the applicant's business, he decides to sell it or it closes for whatever reason, the conditions that are approved as part of a planned development go with that property. Somebody just couldn't buy it and start using it for something other than what was approved in the pattern book. In this particular pattern book that we're looking at today, the only permitted use is for this landscape business. So if another landscaping company wanted to purchase the property and operate under those same parameters, they could do that. It's not like a commercial services zone, which he was asking for before, which would open up whatever is allowed in that zone, he'd be allowed to do, the new owner would be allowed to do. It's very limited in what this applicant is asking for in this particular situation.
Questions for staff? If not, we'll ask the applicant or his representative to come up and make their presentation at this time before we open the public hearing.
Thank you, Chairman Phillips. Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. Thank you for taking the time to hear our presentation. As is mentioned, this has been through several iterations, and we'd like to hopefully get our zoning approved this tonight. As far as the process is concerned, it's been a joy working with Mr. Skelton. I think we'll see he's made every effort to try to make this a positive, not only for the Rockvale community, but also try to respect the neighbors that are adjacent to him. As Doug mentioned, I'll just go through several components. Doug, if we just hit that first slide, the aerial map. Just in general, as Doug mentioned, there's two buildings on the property. One is a trailer, and the other one is a building that Mr. Skelton has constructed, about a 5,000 square foot building. just in terms of relating it to what the neighbors were concerned about, the trailer's been a point of contention to the neighborhood, primarily because Mr. Skelton had employees living there. Some of his seasonal help lives on this location, and the neighbors have complained about, parties and things happen in the evening and on the weekends that they didn't think were suitable for the neighborhood. And that's why the trailer's going to be removed in this process, to really take away something that the neighbors were very concerned about. And I think that's showing goodwill on Mr. Skelton's part, that he wants to make sure that we can take away that issue. The other building, as we mentioned, was a 5,000 square foot metal building that he went through the proper approvals for. And he'll talk a little bit about that when he comes up, but he was working on the impression that the agricultural zone, he thought his landscape company would fit under the agricultural zoning, and therefore he had the right, by right, to use this particular piece of property for a place of business. The adjacent properties are more than 3-acre properties. There's one to the right and to the left. The neighbor to the west or the right-hand side, if you're looking at the property from Rockville, has her home fairly close to her. She's got a large lot, but she's a little bit constricted by the creek behind her, and so she kind of justifies a little bit towards Mr. Burke's property. And on the other side, she has a horse kind of stable as well as a riding area. And then across the street, there's a ranch home with a large acreage. She's concerned primarily about the view, that she's going to look out on her piece of property and see Mr. Skelton's development. So we made sure you could have both a frontal view of what Mr. Skelton's already done, plus we just want to bring to attention that this is going to be landscaped. There's going to be additional buffering that's going to be required, but also willingly implemented by Mr. Skelton. With that in mind, I'll just go to the site plan, Doug. And as is mentioned, right now the building sits more than 200 feet, 235 feet off the main road. So it's recessed quite a bit back, and Mr. Skelton did that intentionally so that it would really not be any kind of a nuisance to the neighbors, and basically using the depth of the lot to try to just buffer, basically, distance is your best buffer, and that's one of the issues he wanted to have. There will be some parking out in front of the facility for what he considers more of his permanent parking workers. Basically, his office staff, sales folks will park out front. The driveway will be paved. Right now it's gravel. It'll be widened and paved as required by just the regulations, development regulations. And I'll look at the front of the building in just a moment. There's 2 pink buildings that are shown as additional, and those are basically lean-to structures. One is to give him some kind of, he needs covered outdoor space to store equipment, and so that's what's going to happen with those pink buildings. But we do want to emphasize that there's a linear buffer all the way down the property line. Mr. Skelton's in the landscaping business, so we trust that'll be a nice buffer, and that's on both sides of the property. He also mentioned that he's willing, if this is something the neighbors are really concerned about, that he would be willing to landscape across the front of the property if they wanted that. I think he's planning on putting foundation planting in front of the building, making it look nice, but he's also willing to turn the corner if it helps to obstruct the view from the neighbor who's concerned. If you go to the next slide, Doug. This is the building. And I think you can see the intention. The front elevation only has that one garage door and one man door. And that garage door is only there. It's a pull-through door. In certain situations, he has a need to pull his equipment through the building for loading or what have you. So that's a door that won't be used. It may be used on a daily basis, but it's not a door that would be open. The building was designed to have all the functionality of the building really behind the building. If you look at the rear elevation, that's where you see the 4 garage doors, the 2 man doors. The majority of all his landscaping activities will be behind the structure, and that was by intent. So you got a building 235 feet off the main road, and all the activity related to the business are behind the structure. Well, not all of them, but 90% of the business activities are behind the building. And lastly, I just kind of generated this slide because we learned a lot about Rockville tonight. Rockville is a community, as Pettis knows, that is under a lot of development pressure. And so part of the concerns that the neighbors had that I've really had to kind of wrestle with is precedent. Are we setting precedent for commercial development in a residential area? And you're going to hear the concerns about that, but I think that precedent's already been set. That this is about a quarter-mile stretch that I show with that bold black line. And that quarter mile, there are basically 6 businesses that are operating. There are 6 non-residential buildings, and I'm including a church in that, but basically what it is there's buildings that are not residential that are along this corridor. 4 of them are active businesses, they're active businesses, they're employers, they're local employers, they're good businessmen. They showed up at our meeting and they had made some very specific requirements that they thought that they'd be more than willing to approve this for Mr. Skelton if he abided by certain things. And their biggest concern was that the septic field would be addressed, that he would go ahead and do that, and that's been addressed. And secondly, that the trailer would be removed because that's been the biggest concern of the neighbors. So with that in mind, I just want you to realize that the context of this particular rezoning has a lot of commercial type of applications around it. There are, in the scope of that quarter mile, there are 9 homes, but even the homes that are there are homes that have typically 1 or 2 outbuildings, and those neighbors are probably using those outbuildings for different kind of light business activities, not like they need business zoning, but they're tooling in their garage and finding ways to earn a little extra money as well. So we feel like this particular project is not inconsistent with what the neighborhood's already bearing. And the other thing is that the neighbors who were at the neighborhood meeting that said, we're setting precedent, they're concerned about that. They bought their homes knowing right down the street there was commercial, literally the next lot over was a commercial property, and right down at the corner at the intersection there are multiple commercial properties. So as much as they like that road and like the Rockvale feel, I feel like if another person comes in and wants to buy their home, they're going to like the feel just like they did when they originally purchased the property. Mr. Skelton's going to come up just for a brief, just to give you a little bit of history, just so you know a little bit about him. He also has a petition associated with he's gone out and talked to a lot of people. This has been a highly contentious zoning case, and I think to Mr. Skelton's, to his credit, I really believe he's done everything he's been asked to do. And I've got a list, of 7 action items that he's taken in order to be responsive to not only what the planning department has asked him to do. He's followed leadership from a consultant. We said, Burke, this is some of the things you need to do. He's met with a lot of local people, and he wants to be a good asset to the community as well as the other businessmen and Rockvale. So they want to be considered as a good thing and not a negative thing to the community. But just in brief, as I mentioned, he purchased the property with the intention of moving his business to this location, ran into complications related to zoning. He learned quick about the commercial zoning, was not passed. He sought us out to develop the PUD. He had to absorb the financial commitment to that, but also the timeline commitment. He would really love this building to get approved so he can move his business over. As I mentioned, the local businesses expressed they're in favor of this because they feel like it's bringing local jobs. He is committed and desires to employ local people. There's a lot of young people that work in the landscaping business, both male and female. He's more than excited about employing Rockvale folks. Like I said, I think he's acted in good faith when he was confronted on the zoning. Eventually he came around to knowing the proper zoning process, and we've been doing that. He stopped work on the existing building because that was what codes required. He's met with the neighbors again on multiple occasions. He agreed to move the trailer. He's addressed the septic field. And as far as Doug's concerned, and what he mentioned is that Mr. Skelton has identified at least another 3,000 square feet of good soil. Right now, it's right at the base of the trailer. Around the trailer, it's flagged out, and Huddleston Steel's currently in the process of getting that surveyed. But he wanted to make sure before this meeting that he had a soil scientist go out to the property and make sure there was more identifiable area. So if the additional system ever has a chance of failing, we have a redundant system. And that was a neighbor's concern. It was Burke's concern, and he followed through on getting that done. And again, the trailer, if this zoning is approved, the trailer's going to be gone, which addresses a major concern the neighbors had. And then finally, he just intends to be a good neighbor, and that's what he wants to do. He chose Rockvale because he lives in Rockvale. He loves Rockvale. He wants to make Rockvale a better community. And as you saw tonight, there's just pressure in this area. There is development happening, and I think this is like Doug said, this is kind of a mixed-use area as it stands with large estate, well, not estate homes, but large property owners with homes on the property, infilled with smaller businesses all along that quarter-mile corridor. So with that, I'm open for any questions you may have for me.
All right, I got 2 questions. Will there be any living quarters in the building?
No living quarters are in the building.
So once if this were approved and the trailer was moved, there would be nobody overnight on the site. And if so, and the second way on that, what are the proposed business hours for the? Because I'm trying to let neighbors know what hours traffic will be coming and going, things like that. 'Cause
Yeah, I think
if
it's a
there's a
gr-
residence now which has multiple people, there could be traffic coming and going all night long, all
Right.
day on Sunday and all, and I'm wondering if this will be an improvement, and if you could talk about that.
Yeah, well, I would say that, landscape businesses are kind of notorious for having kind of an early rise kind of mindset. So their goal really is probably 6 to 7 is a lot of activity at the building. When the guys arrive, their goal is to get out. Most times, 7:30, 8 o'clock, they want to be on the road. And if it's their goal is to stay out. This is not a situation where they want to come back and forth. Once you go out to a landscape job, you stay out to the job. But Burke also wanted to mention that if he's got 25 seasonal employees, not all 25 of those folks will show up at the site. They'll go right directly to the job site. And so that keeps some of the activity off the building as well. And then your landscape companies, you'll have some, there'll be shipments of different kind of product, potentially through the day. But it's not a retail business where there's some sort of need for, private individuals to come to this particular piece of property. And then at the end of the day, in the season, landscape companies can work 6:30. And then the guys, they unload the truck, and the day's done. But as far as fixed hours, Burke, you can kind of mention that more specifically, what you think the fixed hours would be. But in general, landscape companies have people in the mornings, they're gone all day, they come in the afternoon. So it's a fairly light user rather than something, retail that has people coming in all day long.
Well, it may be something Mr. Skelton can answer better, but I'm looking for hard hours. I mean, say that there won't be anybody there before 6 in the morning, won't be anybody there after 8 at night, or something like that.
Sure, he'll address that well.
Because with the PUD, I think we can
Put that in there.
request that, and that way we can tell the neighbors what hours it'll be, and beyond that, except for emergencies, nobody will be coming and going, so they
Okay.
won't have to worry about traffic coming and going all hours of the day and night.
Okay.
Or on Sundays or whatever.
When Mr. Skelton comes up, he'll address that. Any other questions?
No questions from the audience, just from the commission.
Thank you.
Before Mr. Skelton comes up, I'm going to declare the public hearing open, and he can speak on the record during the public hearing. Mr. Skelton.
Good evening. My name is Burke Skelton. I'm with Outdoors Unlimited, and I'm one going after this rezoning on the 10596 Rockville Road. To your question, Mr. Will, we start at 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we wouldn't want to bother the neighbors and get in there any earlier than that. Again, it is a landscape company. We operate by we're determined by weather, whether or not we can work, so we're limited sometimes, but our goal is to be out of there by no later than 7 or 8 with all activities in the evening. Half a days on Saturdays, if anything, and nothing on Sundays. And no one living there. Any other questions for me? Oh, so I have a petition and that we had signed, and
We can keep this correct.
yes. So anyways, we had a petition signed as well in support of our process, and we've done everything we can to work with Doug and Tanya and meet all their demands, as well as TDEC with the soil site and all that. We got the call. They were in a conference call about on a Thursday, not this past week, but the week before that, and asked if we could get a soil map and get that for them. So we brought a guy out there and made that happen. He is the soil scientist we brought out, just came directly from the state's approved list. We called everybody on that list till we found somebody that could come out and do it immediately for this meeting.
Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. While the lady's coming up, I'll point my finger at the gentleman and say, I didn't mean to cut you off, but our rules will not allow questions from the audience. Sorry.
My name is Leslie Self, and I live directly across the street from the proposed business. First of all, I'd like to read a statement from another neighbor who couldn't be here because of sickness. So he asked me to read this to the commission. His name is Mr. Jimmy Nelson, and he lives on the other side of the building. And he says, I'm all for Mr. Skelton having a business, but not in between our houses on Rockville Road. My wife has cancer, and I have an 81-year-old woman in the house. I do not want to subject her to the traffic and noise and everything else that comes with this. I believe there are people staying in the building at this time. There are lights on at 2 to 3 in the morning. I do not see where the stop work order currently on the building has worked, as there is traffic and multiple vehicles every day, and there are people in the building at night. I do not understand how a septic site can be approved. I live next door to this property, and my back field does not flood only because there is a wall. I have seen the property flooded on numerous occasions since I have lived here. The former septic was for a 2-bedroom trailer, and I don't understand how septic could be approved on that very poor site for a 5,000 square foot building. I am concerned about pesticides, chemicals, and the handling of these materials so close to the creek. I have a grandchild here, and I feel this puts him at risk. The site is an eyesore. He said he cleaned it up. The building looks like a factory and does not fit in with the neighborhood at all. And that's the end of his statement. First of all, I would like to address the commercial businesses on Rockville Road. The businesses that I'm aware of were grandfathered in. They've been in the community for a long time. Namely a feed mill and a cabinet shop. At the recent public meeting, Mr. Skelton talked about how he gets his workers utilizing the H-1 seasonal worker visa process, which is not easy to navigate. But at the meeting, he also told us that he proceeded on his building, which was supposed to be a pole barn, because he did not understand the zoning laws and requirements. An understanding of residential versus commercial zoning is not nearly as complicated as understanding the H-1 visa process he utilizes, so with all due respect, I beg to differ in my opinion on this. This is the third location where Mr. Skelton has experienced zoning issues. He left his location on Old Jackson Ridge because the area was not zoned for commercial use and moved to Thompson Road. A stop work order was issued on Thompson Road and Rockville Road. I think this shows some knowledge of zoning laws and what not to do. The building in question today should not even be here. Mr. Skelton got a permit for a pole barn, not a commercial building. He told people he wanted it for storage. He then built out commercial offices with sophisticated plumbing and began operating. After this, a stop work order was issued. He is now asking for forgiveness and to change the zoning to commercial when his operation is located in the middle of residential properties and the residents are against it. I'm not sure what a stop work order means because there is consistent traffic, vehicles, and heavy equipment being brought in and out on a regular basis. Vehicles delivering commercial machine parts have come and gone from the property, and the building is lit up most nights into the morning hours, and this follows a pattern. There have been 3 commission hearings about this building now, where the commercial zoning was turned down, and there was a recent public hearing. The pattern that occurs at the building remains the same, in that 4 to 5 days or a week before each of these hearings, the building goes dark at night and the traffic to the building stops. After the hearing is over, it starts up again. This has been a pattern for months, and any of the neighbors are aware of this activity. At one of the previous meetings, Mr. Skelton brought up the taxes he pays on his H-1 seasonal workers. But in 2015, the state of Tennessee issued a lien against him for failing to pay unemployment taxes with interest and penalties. I believe these repetitive issues with these 3 properties and unemployment taxes show a disregard for regulations and begs the question as to what other regulations he has or may choose to ignore if commercial zoning is granted. Why have zoning laws if people are rewarded by being granted commercial zoning just because they choose to break the law in the first place and construct a commercial building on a residential site? This is not the first time this has happened in Rutherford County, and it shows a disregard for zoning laws. This is from the Rutherford County Plan for 2011. From goal statement number 1, it says to ensure growth policies that recognize land is a limited resource and that growth should occur where suitable land use and public services can be economically provided. Discourage development in areas with marginal soils, inadequate public services, and inadequate transportation. To maintain the traditional rural character of Rutherford County, and to establish growth and development policies that respect individual property owners' rights while seeking consensus on future development goals. I have a petition, and this is the second one that I have submitted, that has 37 signatures. All of them are on Rockville Road or just off Rockville Road. And these are the individuals who will be affected the most by the proposed zoning, and they do not want it. This represents the majority, and I do mean the majority, of the 2.5-mile-long Rockville Road. I've counted 55 houses along this road. The concerns the neighbors voiced to me when I was knocking on their door were, number 1, they don't want the rural landscape changed. They want to live in the country. Number 2, they do not believe they will benefit in any way by the business being located here. Number 3, they don't like the employees living on the premises in the trailer, and they believe they will be relocated inside the building. Number 4, they don't want the traffic and breakdown of roads that will occur with heavy equipment. Number 5, they believe one business will lead to another, and Rockville Road will be swallowed up by commercial businesses, and this will set precedent. Number 6, they are concerned about the ramifications of storage of pesticides and chemicals, especially with the flooding that has occurred on the lot in question in the Blue Line Creek. Number 7, they believe the few existing operations on Rockville Road were grandfathered in and serve the community and contribute to the landscape. And number 8, they do not believe Mr. Skelton will bring jobs to the community, as the majority of his workers, as he stated, are H-1 seasonal workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Mark Sklar, and I have invested in several homes in the area in the past and would like to continue, as it is a nice residential area, and this is where my concern lies. My presentation to you tonight is all about facts. Here are the facts. According to Mr. Jeanette with TDEC, the septic system, which was installed in 1971, does not support the current system. Water usage for the proposed operation for commercial uses is exactly 25 gallons per day per employee. This proposed septic site will not cover the needed capacity necessary for these employees, nor will the absorption rate ever cover the capacity. According to Mr. Jeanette at TDEC, there was supposed to be supplied to this council an elevation of property study from the engineering firm. And that was my question earlier, was where is the elevation of property study? And since FEMA did not update their flood map for this parcel, nor does the U.S. Geological Map Services cover this parcel, that puts even more need for the elevation of property study, which has not been supplied. Ms. April Grippo, Supervisor of Tennessee Division of Water Resources, says the building needs to be at least 1 foot above the highest known water level on the property. This is very troubling due to the close proximity of Concord Creek, being designated as a Blue Line Creek. The runoff and drainage into this creek is extremely hazardous. Mr. Skelton is in total violation and disregard of the current stop work order. He originally proposed the building to be used for storage only. In fact, Mr. Skelton deceived and misled his intentions to Rutherford County for the construction of this so-called pole barn. Therefore, he is in fact subject to a Class C misdemeanor charge. This can be substantiated by TDEC Supervisor Tim Jeanette. Without a revised FEMA mapping being completed recently, this puts even more importance on the elevation of property study that Mr. Skelton's engineering firm was supposed to supply. According to Mr. Skelton, the soil scientist in Williamson County, his last name is also Skelton, that was hired to do the necessary soil work was not completed as of March 8 of this year, nor was there adequate area for a secondary system that could be found that is required by law. In Huddleston Steele's report, it states that Outdoors Unlimited provides lawn and landscape maintenance services to over 125 residential, commercial, and institutional clients in the Middle Tennessee region. Burke Shelton is also an applicator of agricultural pesticides and chemicals. In this report, it states that Mr. Skelton's company could employ up to 25 employees at a time. There will also be a parking area in the front of the building which will be paved. In the engineering report, it states that soil area has been evaluated and determined to be acceptable. I would like to know by whom. According to the installation or repair record of the septic tank system, this is rocky soil, black soil material, shallow topsoil, and in the report, which was installed by Lawrence Brothers in Chapel Hill, Tennessee, it appears this so-called pole barn was built over the original field lines from 1971, and at the time there was only one soil site available. According to the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation Division of Groundwater Protection, on 6/17/2014, issued to William Hartley, the owner of the property at that time, that the current system needed repair, and it was signed by Mr. Alan Sharpenow. The revised 2014 report shows the field lines going back 105 feet from the trailer, which was never completed and had never had any repairs made. On 4/18/2013, Mr. Chardonnay, in the diagram of his certificate of completion of subsurface sewage disposal system, it appears to me that where he currently put in his septic system is not in an approved soil site. Per the USDA, on USDA.gov, on their soil survey, it maps out the existing soils on this 2.8 acres, and it is as follows. 28.6% of the soil is Egham silt loam. 49.6% is in Gladeville rock outcrop complex. 2 to 15% slopes, extremely stony. 21.8% was in Talbot Barfield rock outcrop complex, 2 to 12% slopes. This actually covers 3.1 acres. This represents well over 90% of the property being in unsuitable soils. 2 different attempts have already been made without having any septic approvals. How many more must it take? According to the Department of Environment and Conservation, Division of Groundwater Protection, on an inspection letter on 1/31/17 this year, an investigation of the subsurface sewage disposal system, which does not include plumbing and other fixtures, preceding the septic tank was performed at 10596 Rockville Road here in Rutherford County, owned by Mr. Skelton. No record of this site evaluation could be found. Also, no record of the sewage system construction or approval could be found. According to the Tennessee Division of Water Resources by its supervisor, Ms. April Grippo, the 2016 water samples show that Concord Creek, which is an EPA-designated blue line creek that runs through the back of this property, is not suitable for aquatic life, according to the state study. It also showed definite deficiencies in the 2002 study as well. Currently, the Tennessee Division of Water Resources has designated Concord Creek as an impaired stream and already polluted with nutrients, with the proximity of potential leakage of pesticides and chemicals used in Mr. Skelton's business is further concerning for the proximity of the Concord Creek and the potential runoff. With this current situation, Mr. Skelton would have to get appropriate and proper permits to operate his business this close to Concord Creek. Also, the state of Tennessee requires an even further buffer than Rutherford County requires as a result of the impaired creek status. Furthermore, if more than 1 acre is involved from state regulation, a CGP, which stands for a Construction General Permit, must be issued for the protection of the buffer zones. This is also known as a grading permit for land disturbance. This land disturbance permit is to originate from Rutherford County itself. Nothing in this engineering report addresses this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Leah Skelton. I am the wife of Burke Skelton, owner of Outdoors Unlimited. Thank you for your time tonight. I know this has been a super long process for you guys, even a very long night for all of us. So I'll try to keep it short. Basically, I do not work in Burke's landscaping company. For the sake of our marriage, I've decided that it's best that I just stay out of the business, so he hired for that. So let me try to address just a few facts as I know them. Absolutely, I can speak to the heart and character of my husband because I'm the one who sees him come home. I'm the one who sees him hit his knees. I'm the one who sees him care about his community. I'm the one he talks to about how he wants to help the baseball teams, how Rockville is building a new high school, and he would love for his tax dollars to be able to contribute to our community. I'm also the one who sees the tears in his eyes, even though he is a big burly guy, when he's hurt by accusations that are false. There is no specific pattern going on at this building. There is no one living at this building. There are no bathrooms. There is no heat and air. There is no one living there. When he initially filed for a permit, he was told when he went to get the permit, this is a $50 permit. He corrected them and said, for a business? And they said, oh, no. And he said, yeah, I need to pay the one for the business. It's public record. Burke bought a permit for $655 for his building, which is the business permit. We do not use an H1 program. It is called an H2B program for our employees that we have to bring up because we can't find employees that we can hire. We have certainly tried several times. I have seriously watched Burke stop on the side of the road and asked homeless people holding signs for money and jobs, and they said, "What kind of job?" He said landscaping, and their reply was, "Hell no." We would love to employ local workers. That is what he wants to do. He wants to be a part of the community. So that is definitely his heart's desire. Let me see. The tax lien was for $1.10 because of a clerical error. It still was there, it still was addressed, and it was fixed. That is something that I see in Burke on a continual basis. His heart is true, his heart is valid, his heart is strong. Does the man make mistakes? Absolutely. All of us do. But I watch him daily do his best to correct anything that comes his way. The guys will kind of have to address some certain specific things, but I know there have been soil scientists out. You know, he spoke a minute ago and said, how many times does it have to be asked? How many times does he have to do it? He has done all he can do. He has had the soil scientists out. He's had it all looked at. There would be very few employees on site. You know, they've talked a couple of different times about the number of employees. He has, I think, maybe 4 to 6 that would be on site. That's about it. The guys who come in on the work visas typically meet at the job site. They rarely would be at the facility. I'm sure for some purposes occasionally they would, but that would be rare. So the issue of talking about the septic system itself and what it would hold, there'll be 4 to 6 people there on a regular basis. There won't be the 25 plus. So I think I've kind of covered everything that I would like to cover. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
My name is Eddie Macon, and I reside at 9970 Concord Road. My residence there is my retirement home. I purchased the property there in 1996 because I wanted to live in the Rockvale area. To give you a little bit of history, I was first exposed to Rockvale in 1981, where I worked with Teledyne Technology in Lewisburg, and I was going to graduate school at MTSU, and I would drive the old road back to Murfreesboro 2 nights a week, and I would come right down in front of what they referred to a few minutes ago as a corridor. That area has changed significantly since then. And if you drive down, and I don't know if any of the individuals that's making the decision tonight has been down through there recently, it's not quite the beautiful place that it used to be. Right now, I think I counted 4 abandoned homes that are currently rotting, and no one is living there, growth around them. There was one business that was left out. If I was going to be worried about property value, I would be worried about the car repair shop. It was showed in the photographs, but wasn't talked to a while ago. I counted 23 cars at that business tonight. Some of them parked so close to the road that I think it's a safety hazard. I counted 30 cars there Friday night at 9 o'clock. Something, and I think it's more of a social thing going on. But all I'm saying is the number of cars isn't an issue for me. Also, I'm the president of the Rockvale Ruetan Club, and as being the president, I have the honor of being the facility manager of the Rockvale Ruetan Club. We have a baseball field there. From April through about September timeframe, there are 8 poles with 1,500 watt lights on each pole that light up that whole area. There are as many as 20 to 40 cars there, 300 people participating in the ball games or attending the ball games. The community center is open for renting. We use it quite frequently for birthday parties. It's not uncommon for there to be 20 or 30 cars there for someone using that facility. So I don't really see as an issue of adding another commercial or high volume, if you want to call it. I travel that road 3 to 4 times a day, taking my kids to school, and at night, checking on the facility there. And I really think that we are adding to the community and not taking away. The Rockvale Community Center, we depend on local businesses. We are getting very little support from our local citizens as attrition and people pass away or move off. We are depending on local businesses to really keep our ball program going, keep our community center available for people to use for family events. So, and I see this as an opportunity for another business to support us. So I am in favor of Mr. Skelton's business being allowed. Thank you.
My name is John W. Hayes. I live at Rockvale Road, Rockvale, Tennessee. I'm 86 years old. I live in Rockvale all my life. I've paid taxes since 68 years there. This is not a whitewater or blue water creek. If you want to doubt me, you can call 615-898-7739. This is Environmental Division of Tennessee. You'll find out it's not designated anything. It's just a creek. I live a house approximately 2,000 feet from this piece of property. There's used to be a double wide there. It's downhill. It never was a ideal place to build a house. It's not, wouldn't be an ideal place to build a expensive house. I'll put it that way. And I understand he's going to do something about that. I know a little about planning. I was in the same class as Mr. Adelot. A lot of you know him, and some probably don't. I decided to pick up aluminum cans for a living after I was in the behind Mr. Ken Seiler, which is a professor, a doctor, political science over in MTSU. I'm still picking up aluminum cans. The birth rate in Rockvale is very low. Older people own their homes for years and years and years. Own a house there 53 years. It's not a, and I have 2 children, both, one deceased and one still living. I pay an extreme amount of taxes in the community. I own 5 houses there or so. And if you want to get down to what's good and bad, try to find your way out to the medical facility. Codes won't allow large numbers on the building. If it has large numbers that you can see from the Medical Center Parkway, I'm getting away from it, through the bushes, put them up high. 16-inch letters would be good. So if you have an appointment at 1653 or whatever it is, you can see it. You can go right to it. But now you got to, I don't care if the building's name, what is his name? Go to the building, it's inside. You got to go inside to see the name of the building. Let's get away from that stuff. If you can't stand a number on a building or a commercial building in the housing area, get a life. Get over it. That's pretty well I got to say. And also a business pays more taxes than a house. If you want a business, you're going to have to pay a lot of tax. And you don't send children to school. A business don't. Maybe the workers do. maybe the workers can make enough money to build a nice house in the community if you can find a perk spot. And the perk spots owned by one man 1 mile down the road, the new highway or the old highway, which will not sell an inch of it. So we struck. We have to take what we can, and I'm for this place. There's nothing wrong with it. The people that come to me and wanted to deny the rate, they're interlopers. They weren't born and raised here. They have no ties in the community except here recently. So build it, fellas. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else, better be quick, getting late. We've got someone else coming up. Excuse me, we've got someone else coming up. We need to have someone who hasn't had the opportunity to speak do so first. Good afternoon.
Been a member of the Rockville community for over 30 years. My family owns, and we've run the cabinet shop on the corner that's been spoke of here tonight, within a quarter mile of Mr. Skelton's property that's been proposed to you tonight. We feel he's made tremendous improvements to the property in question. He held a community meeting to comply with any of those in the community that was opposing his plans. Opened up to us, answered any questions, and we just feel like, and also I want to speak on his workers. I know for a brief time, it was a very short period, some workers were in that area. We see no problem with the additional traffic. They all seemed respectful. Didn't see any type of issues whatsoever. And with that being said, me and my family and many of the neighbors that we've spoke to feel like that this business will be an asset to our community, and we welcome him, his family, and his business. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and keep this short. It's a long evening. I appreciate hearing from everybody in Rockville community. I am Angela Langdon. I live exactly next to Mr. Skelton's proposed building. And it's very interesting to hear what everybody has to say. The one thing that comes to mind is that the majority of people who've been speaking here in favor of his building don't actually live next door to it. I would like to see any of these good gentlemen and businessmen contemplate that building within 150 feet of their backyard. Just a suggestion. There are issues with the creek at the back of all the properties along Rockville Road, and despite the very nice gentleman's determined view that it isn't a blue line creek, it actually is a blue line creek, and the area, even though the federal government failed to do the flood map to our part of the Concord Creek district in 2008, it was in the 100-year flood zone. And when it rains, there is a lot of water that comes across my property from the other side of Rockville Road and consumes a lot of the land adjacent to my property. That has been an issue for a long time. So the problem I see now is, yes, if it's only going to be storage and maintenance and they're not going to have a mass of people in there all the time, that's fine. But there are problems with storage of chemicals. and also the disposal of cleaning materials used for cleaning equipment which water is involved in. There is a detention pond set in the plan at the back of the property. I have to ask what a detention pond is meant to be used for on a piece of property that has poor permeability. It will, in the end up permeating into the creek area, because at the back of the creek, that is the only EG soil. It's silt loam soil. So my concerns are there is a vast amount of water that pours out of the sky in our area that has only one intention, but of going downhill. And so how much water can be handled? Water has a way of going its own way, as I know, because my property is subject to massive flooding at points, and it'll find its own way out. I really have serious problems about the whole concept of the layout of the business. I don't know how the stormwater is going to be managed. You know, if nobody's living there, that's great, but it's still going to need serious consideration of how you manage all the water and the effect it will have on the septic, which I have to remark, since I live next door to it, it is one of the lowest points on that property. So it's all very well saying the soil elevation site should view where the building is. Actually, it might be good to remember that that septic area that they're proposing to expand is in the lowest part of that area of the property, as I've known, because my property floods at the same time that does, and has in the past. So I'm going to leave you with that, and thank you very much for your time.
Anyone else that hasn't spoken yet? Ron, am I going to have to remind you to keep it at 3 minutes? Not you?
How y'all doing tonight? My name's Ronald Williams. I'm an interloper from out there. Only been there since '49. I like his business, and I like all the things that he said. I just don't like it on this piece of property. I'm as familiar with that piece of property as anybody that's here, since I've worked in it for years. My great-grandfather owned it. The back of the property floods. There is no soil site to speak of. It's all really, whatever they put in is going to fail, because there's just not any depth of topsoil there. If you show where the septic system is, it's right next to this lady's property line, and that's a big concern, because there's nothing that they can do about it. If he had a bigger piece of property, the property was wider, he wasn't right next to it. I mean, there's only one way in and out of this property. The road is narrow. And I understand people that are in favor of the business. I'm pro-business. I want everybody to have business. It's just at the wrong location. You know, and Mr. Skelton has been out in the area for some times. One of my favorite movies is Open Range. It's got Robert Duvall in it and Kevin Costner. And in that movie, the town people get mad at them because they are free grazers. Well, he's been here for 10 years. He's been at 3 locations, and he's never been there. So he's been kind of a codes-free grazer on this for 10 years without really doing this. So I sort of have a little issue with giving somebody permission after they've been up here. In November, he knew he needed a soil site. In December, he needed a soil site. January, February, he needed a soil site. So now he's got one that's almost there. And that guy finds a soil site there is a magician, I'm going to tell you. So I think that it's just the wrong piece of property for what he's trying to do. Although I'm in favor of the business, there's just too many reasons for it not to be on that narrow piece of property in a narrow road with only one entrance in it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Man, I know you're about to give out.
Yes.
I'm about to hit all this I can handle myself. I'm going to draw you a different picture probably than anybody you've heard. I hadn't been out there as long as Ronald has, but I can tell you he hadn't worked that property since 1970, okay? I want to tell you a little bit about this property. My business is in walking distance of this place. There's three things I asked Burke if he wanted to garner my support to help him was he's got to get that septic tank approved. He's got to have a soil site. I've made no qualms about that. He's got to take care of getting the trailer out of there. He's also got to make sure there's never a resident that stays in there. With that being said, I want to talk about the property just a minute because I watched the last TV show when it was on TV. And I'm going to tell you the facts, and I'm not going to paint you anything but the facts. Here's the facts. I moved out there in 1970. Between that feed mill and between that garage, there was one house there on that whole stretch. Nothing historical about this particular stretch highway. That was the main road. That was the road. One house. My Uncle Thurman Williams remodeled that house. He and my aunt lived there until they both had passed away. Okay? One house. So everybody else kind of knew since I got there in 1970, along that way. Let me tell you something else about that piece of property. It sits between two different commercial tracks already. The garage or the feed store is less than 300 yards from this site. 300 yards. Okay? Go the other direction toward the cabinet shop, it's less than 253 yards. I walked it today. I want to see, if I was out walking, I'm in the city, I want to walk it. If I'm coming from where the feed mill used to be at, it took me 2 minutes and 50 seconds to get to this site. When I go down to Elrod's cabinet shop, it took me 2 minutes, 24 seconds. We're talking about less than 5 minutes to walk across from one commercial to the next commercial. And these houses that are in there today, there's a total of, I believe what I got is 4 and 5 is a total of 9 houses down through there, counting the double wide, okay? So make sure I get it just exactly right. Why am I involved? I watched the last televised hearing and heard the untruths being told about Guatemalans, use of property, condition of property, devalue of the properties around the site. You know, I went through this same thing before this same group in 2006, and I heard just about the same thing. Nothing's changed. I'm telling you, we're going to devalue property if you zone this commercial. Let me tell you, when I was here in 2006, I was willing to give a crazy price per acre of $12,614 for an acre for a piece of property that is farther away than some sites that just have been sold and developed in the last 12 months that were sold for $19,500 an acre. That's a lot closer to this site than my $12,000 is. So don't tell me about devaluing Rutherford County. I know you've heard about the $59 million school we got going in, starting in May. It's for real. We need businesses. But I'm telling you, Bert, we got to have a septic site. It's got to be an approved site, and I understand you got that coming. I'd really like to see this group prove what you're doing, contingent on that. Heard a testimony tonight talking about sewer records and can't find the records and all that. I'm in the HVAC, plumbing, heating, and air business. Walk up and try to find a sewer record today. If it was built beyond 1980, I say you're going to get about 50% of them. They don't know where the other 50%'s at. That's a fact. I do it. That's my job to do that. It's important. Let me tell you something else I did. Today I spoke with 2 people out of those 9. 2 people out of those 9 along this little stretch. When I explained to them my 3 criteria for Burke to get my support, they had signed this petition, these 30-something petitions. And they said, Jim, I'd have never signed it if it had been presented in that manner. So a lot of times people sign something and don't know the facts. Matter of fact, one of them, if I can hand this out, happens to be my uncle's daughter that lives in one of these 9 houses. She signed a petition. Jim, I want to thank you for your time today and informing me of Mr. Skelton's business plans. Had I known this in the beginning, I would not have signed the petition. If Mr. Skelton will meet the above request documented above, which are those 3 criteria in my email, I will have no problem supporting him and his business. I know 3 out of the 9 property owners that support this based on the facts. Okay, based on that. So with that being said, I don't know much more I can tell you, other than the fact we need the business, provided he meets the septic system. I'd welcome him in my backyard. I've already asked him to do that. So thank you for your time.
I promise you, Commissioners, I'll be fast because I know you've been here a long time, and I have caused you a lot of problems every time something like this comes up, my name. But, you know, basically this commission right here at the very beginning asked for a PUD, and this is pretty much what he has brought to you tonight. When this is done, if you'll look at it, I think it's pretty much probably one of the most regulated pieces of property on that road when it is finished and what has been said there. He is basically going to screen it from the rest of the properties around there. The trailers will be gone. That's one thing I asked for, that he would remove those trailers, that there would not be anybody living on that property, which the neighbors deserve. At that public hearing, that's what they asked for. They didn't want that, and I think that's pretty much it. I think you've heard pretty much tonight, everybody's asked for that soil site. I do know that he went out and found the soil scientist to take care of that and where that's going there. And I think you've heard everybody here tonight. Basically, what you've seen here, there's a 50-50 situation out there as far as people feel about this property. I've done pretty much like Jim today. I went around asking some of these people, and we've talked back and forth, and I've heard pretty much the same thing. So the story you've heard here tonight is pretty much it. I think what you asked for is pretty much what's been presented.
Anyone else wishing to speak? You've got 1 minute.
I just want to mention that these businesses that everybody talks about in the area, they're all been grandfathered. They've been there since the beginning of time, and so they're nothing new to the area. According to county records, the only building permits issued in the past few years in Rockville have been for residential ones only, a total of 5. Accordingly to records, there have not been any properties rezoned commercial on Rockville Road since the new Highway 99 was built. Last thing is, everything I shared with this body tonight is facts. It can all be backed up by state facts, rules, and regulations, and county. So I invite anybody in here to check every single thing I said. It can all be substantiated, and it's facts, not fiction. Thank you for your time.
We're all done. I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners.
Doug, I guess to you and Mike, I mean, we've been presenting one end of the spectrum to the other on this, and I'm not going to say that anybody's not telling us the truth, but obviously there's some huge discrepancies. And really tonight, the only opinion that matters is you guys who we look to. You're our liaisons. You tell us the truth, the facts, and we take that and we go with the best of our knowledge. where do you stand as far as with the biggest question that was on the agenda was still the sewage, the sanitary system. Where are you at from a county perspective, even from a code's perspective? Are we okay with where we're at today as we stand tonight?
I mean, we've got the same information that basically the applicant presented. We know he had a soil scientist go out there. From what he's telling us, yes, he has found additional soil, which should be adequate to do what he wants to do with. Have I seen official documentation, the actual written report to that effect? I have not. So that's about as much as I can say on that. I don't doubt what he's saying. I mean, if he's saying he found it, I'm taking him at his word. It's a situation that, really, it doesn't really serve to give him any advantage to not be truthful about it, because if he goes through this process, assuming he gets approved, and he gets to the point of needing to get a building permit, and that site's not there, he's not getting a building permit. So he's got a lot of time and a lot of money riding on that. So I know he had somebody go out there, and I know they found something, but we just haven't seen official documentation to that.
If we approve this tonight, it would be subject to our standard procedures afterwards as far
That's
as,
correct.
even though there's a building already there,
Yes.
a plan had to be presented to us and all that.
That's
It'll have to
absolutely
meet
correct.
all county codes and all county standards.
Yes. And that includes all building codes as well. The stop work order that was posted on the site, I know there's no plumbing in the building, there's no nothing right now. They would have to adhere by all the adopted building and fire codes that Rutherford County has adopted as well.
Stop order still in effect today, or is it?
I believe it. Tanya? It is still in effect, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but it is strictly for the interior build-out of the building. It is not for the building.
Doug, if we should approve this, is there any way he can do retail or just run it?
What's in his pattern book is what he's allowed to do. He makes no mention of any retail. He makes no mention of any residential use. It's strictly for a landscape business.
You said earlier, really the only thing that can change is the owner. The criteria remains the same even if the ownership of the property changes.
That is correct. If somebody wanted to change that criteria, they'd have to come back through this entire process, like to change the use or something to that effect.
I just want to clarify one thing. We've got a 5,000-foot building, something in that range there. That building's not going anywhere. The building had a permit. It's not like if we turn this down, they're tearing that building down. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
That is absolutely correct. The building was permitted.
So the building's there, it's still, it's due to the stop work order, nor is somewhat of a construction site looking that there's no landscaping, there's no buffer, there's no anything, but if we turn this down, the building's not going anywhere. We cannot get rid of the trailer. We cannot ask for the landscaping. He could put his junk or whatever he wants to in it, as long as it's inside the building, and be compliant as far as it's not a business use, and stuff. So,
correct.
And what Commissioner Reed said, last time we were not comfortable when he was up there giving him a zoning that would go with the property for eternity or perpetuity or whatever. And so this is more or less exactly what we asked, when we turned it down last time. At least what we mentioned will be more palatable to us. So.
And being a part of a business there, he would have to adhere to any rules and regulations with pesticide storage and everything. That's a whole nother state agency that deals with
Correct.
that.
Just because the zoning ordinance may not address something like that.
Right, that's all.
He's still going to have to, and there may be something in the performance standards actually that does deal somewhat on that, but I mean, primarily the state will dictate
as
what
any
he
sort
has
of
to
license applicator or whatever he may or may not hold will dictate those rules
Correct.
there. And
correct.
also too, the proposed layout shows that it was a 60-foot buffer on the creek.
Yes,
Between
I mean,
the
he'll be
detention
required to maintain the
Yeah,
buffer,
which is-
whatever the county requirements are, or state requirements.
That's a
That's
good
correct.
buffer there for that creek as well.
To address the pesticide storage issue, if he's a commercial, I've got a permit, a license to, an applicator's license. If you've got a commercial license, then you've gone through a lot more training, a lot more testing.
Yes, and I have that license as well. And I mean, there's regulations on storage and disposal and everything. I mean, it's pretty tedious regulations, so.
I just have to express some of the same concerns, I guess, with inconsistencies that I share with the folks who came up here and spoke against this. I want to talk about the stop work order for a minute. You just said that was basically just stop construction on the building. That's all that meant.
No, he actually got a permit for the building. He got all his inspections. We finalized the building. He started an interior build-out without a permit, and we put a stop work order on that.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Strictly that.
So what's the downside then to ignoring that and continuing to run your business out of a not built out building? Because obviously with the photographs and the time dates, if we're to take this information at face value, he's continued to operate his business out of that location.
He's not operating a business out at the location. I went out there today. There is nothing in that building. There is a jet ski and an old truck, and that's it. We had gotten the same calls, so I went out there.
You get one of these
Yes.
packets?
Yes.
So really
They're allowed to use, he's allowed to use the building for personal storage. We didn't put a stop work order from him using it.
Well, there's a picture in here from March 5th where there's 9 vehicles at 7:30 in the morning. A whole lot of people to come look at a jet ski or whatever's in there. I'm not arguing with you. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying I share their skepticism that perhaps we're not being dealt with entirely truthfully. Can you offer us any clarity on the concern about it is a blue line stream, it isn't a blue line stream? This has got to be frustrating for them because they're being told one thing one place and something else another place. You know, again, like Chip said, you're the ones we turn to for our expertise that we rely on. The clarity for the soil site and the clarity for the blue line stream, both of those are important to me. So can you enlighten us?
It is classified as a blue line stream. And it is, Concord Branch is on the 303D list of impaired streams in the state. And it's, let's see, if I could find it again. It's impaired due to pasture, grazing, alteration to stream side or littoral vegetative cover, loss of biological integrity due to siltation. So a lot of the problem is with the adjacent farming.
One of the residents made a mention of that we had expected to receive an elevation study. I don't recall that specifically. Do you recall that from the last meeting, that was due to us as part of this, if it were to come before us again?
No, I don't recall making that statement in the last meeting. What we discussed was that the study for Concord Branch ended like 1.5 miles from the site. FEMA didn't study Concord Branch all the way to the end of it, to the headwaters. So I mean, it's way across. If I can turn it on and show you. And this is headwaters to the Harpeth River. It eventually flows into the Harpeth River. So it's flowing to the west. And this is Concord Branch right here. And this is an unnamed tributary of Concord Branch. But the flood study stops way back here. So it might be in a flood zone, it might not.
But we didn't request one.
Ma'am?
We didn't request one that you can recall.
I don't recall.
Sir, may I ask a question?
No. Anybody want to suspend the rules, let him speak?
That's Concord Creek, yes, sir. Well, there's one down here. It's an unnamed tributary to Concord.
West of Concord proper. Down about, here a half mile. Is that Concord
This is Concord Creek right here is what they're calling Concord Creek. Right here. And then this is a tributary right here to Concord Creek.
They do meet together down.
Yes, yes, sir. Right before it crosses Highway 99. They come together.
Both of them are Concord Creek. Neither one of them run you out there to drain.
I just have one follow-up question for Ms. Bell. When the building was it permitted as a pole barn or as a building?
A pole barn is just a definition of an accessory structure. It's just a different way to build it. A pole barn can be skinned in metal and used for whatever you want to use it. It's not typically a wooden barn for hay storage. It really just is a definition of the way that they build it, the way they construct it. It was built as an accessory structure for personal storage.
Doug, all storage is inside the building, correct?
I mean, with the exception of some of the work vehicles. I mean, there'll be probably some vehicles out, but as far as equipment and everything, he's got all the bay doors are on the back, so most of that equipment, yes, will be inside.
So the lot will be maintained in a pleasing light. It won't be stuff strode all over the lot, correct?
There shouldn't be, based on what he's proposing in his development package. There's a storage area on the back, plus he's got some, what he called, I believe, lean-tos a little earlier. But as far as just, equipment just kind of haphazardly lying around, that's not what he's proposing.
So if we do turn it down, those, as Will says, the building still be there, and the lot could be or could not be maintained. It could be trashed.
Well, I mean, it would be maintained it would just be a residential accessory structure at that point. Now, of course, and Ms. Bell could certainly, speak more to this, there are, open storage issues and different things like that in the building code and even in the zoning ordinance that we could still enforce if it became a problem. But, so, I mean, correct, right. As Mr. Jordan's saying, there'd be we wouldn't be able to require any landscaping, no buffers, nothing like that.
As it's going to be now, if we approve it.
Say again, I'm sorry.
There will be
if this is approved, now, of course, again, the Planning Commission here is just a recommending body, understand, but if it gets approved by the County Commission, then, yes, the full-blown site plan had to be submitted to our office for review and approval, and that's when we'd see all these improvements that have to be made.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Item number 17-A007. Other discussion?
One quick thing, Jeff. I took the time to ride by there. We were out towards Rockvale, Eagleville, and I have looked. I think with the control that the county will have with this plan in place and the trailer gone with adequate, and I'd like to make sure within this motion we say that the soils are adequate, this approved by TDEC or environmental or whoever has to approve them too. But I think it'll probably look better 5 years from now than it does right now or did 2 years ago. So.
Yep, all that's understood. All staff's comments, yes.
The last comment I would make before we vote is I do feel like there have been times where perhaps the applicant has misrepresented his intent to us, whether it be on purpose or not. Only he knows his heart. I just want to say this on behalf of the folks who have to live out there. This is the best case scenario that we can move forward given the situation that we're in. And I'm disappointed like they are that we ever got to this point. But a PUD is the most control we will ever have to make sure that he is held accountable for doing the things that he says he's going to do. So when I cast my vote, that's the reason why.
Questions or comments? We have a motion and a second to approve. Item number 17-A007 for Burke Skelton. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Opposition? The motion to approve carries unanimously. This will go before the full County Commission Thursday, April the 13th, 6:30 p.m. in this courtroom. Doug, you have anything else? Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 27th of this month, 9 a.m. in the Planning Mezz. Anybody else have anything? I'd like to thank the audience for your participation in this process. It's meaningful to us, and it gives us information that we can make, hopefully, a better decision. And thank you, Commissioners, for attentiveness tonight. We are adjourned.